Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's meeting of the Licensing Subcommittee, Wednesday, 12th of May. To determine the business as set out in the agenda provided below. My name is Councillor Jude Spat and I'm Chair of the Licensing Committee and I'm the presiding person for the purposes of this meeting. Therefore, I'm asking for a nomination for Chair, please, with regards to this meeting. May I have a nomination for Chairman? Thank you.
I'd like to nominate yourself, Councillor Burt.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. And may I have a seconder, please? Are you happy to second, yes. Councillor Anderson?
Yes, I'm happy to second that.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we will start then with our housekeeping and I will ask our clerk, Michelle Cutler, to take us through that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Please note that this meeting of the Licensing Subcommittee is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. In order to ensure the meeting is managed effectively, please could everyone present follow these ground rules for speaking. Only speak when invited by the Chair. State your name before you speak if you have not been introduced by name. Please ensure that you unmute yourself and always turn on the video function before speaking. Mute your microphone when you are not talking. After each party has made their representation, the Chair will ask each person in turn if they have any questions or comments. However, if at any point you would like to speak again, please use the raise your hand function at the top right of the screen. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms Cutler. So now we go on to the agenda and apologies. We do have apologies. We have apologies from Councillor Bagwell, who unfortunately is unwell today, and also Councillor Brown, who is our first reserve. And we're very grateful to Councillor Burton for standing in as second reserve today. Thank you very much, Councillor Burton. So it is Councillor Anderson and Councillor Burton. So I'll ask them in turn now, please. Any declarations of interest? Councillor Anderson, do you have any declarations of interest with regard to the flowchart on page 2 of the agenda?
No, I don't.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Burton?
No, neither do I. Thank you.
Okay. And I have no declarations to make myself either. Thank you. So the protocol for public speaking, agenda item 4. Please note that a revised protocol for virtual meetings has been circulated with the agenda sheet with regard to COVID. So we move on to item 5, which is BH1 Stop Mini Market, Old Christchurch Road, Bournemouth. I'm advised that this has been withdrawn and it will not be heard. Moving on to item 6, More the Merrier, 68 Kimberley Road, Bournemouth. The subcommittee is asked to open and adjourn this application for variation of premises licence at the request of the applicant's legal representative, and it has been agreed thus. Therefore, this item will be adjourned until the 9th of June 2021. We now move on to item 7, Urban Reef, Undercliff Drive, Bournemouth. An application has been received for variation of a premises licence for the premises known as Urban Reef, Undercliff Drive, Bournemouth. Matters before the Licensing Committee for determination. I will ask each person to introduce themselves and for the councillors, please, to state their wards. I'll begin with myself. My name is Councillor Jude Spat. I'm Chairman of the Licensing Committee and Chair of this subcommittee, and my ward is Creekmore, Hilborn and Waterloo. Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
Good morning. My name is Councillor Sarah Anderson. I'm a member of the Sub-Licensing Committee and I represent Moordown Ward. Thank
you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Burton.
Good morning, Chair. I'm Councillor Richard Burton, also a member of the Licensing Subcommittee, and I am from Bearwood and Merley Ward.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. Sarah Rogers.
Good morning, Sarah Rogers, Senior Licensing Officer for BCP Council.
Thank you, Ms Rogers. And Tanya Coulter.
Morning, Chair. Tanya Coulter, Senior Solicitor at BCP Council.
Thank you, Ms Coulter. And Michelle Cutler.
Good morning, Chair. I'm clerk to the subcommittee today.
Thank you, Mrs Cutler. And in addition, Democratic Services officers are providing technical support in the background and it's holding up to this moment. So we're grateful for that, but they don't take part in the meeting. So to introduce now John Payne, our licensing lawyer solicitor for applicant.
Yes,
good morning. Introduce yourself, Mr. Payne. Thank you.
Good morning. You've introduced me. Yes, good morning, Chair.
If you'd like to tell us who you are and where you're from, thank you.
Yeah, just well, to reiterate what you said, my name is John Payne. I'm the lawyer representing the applicant Urban Reef in this particular application.
Thank you very much. And Mark Cribb?
Sorry, struggling with the mute button. Morning, thanks for having me. My name's Mark Cribb. I'm the Managing Director of Urban Reef Restaurant.
Thank you, Mr. Cribb. And Sergeant Gareth Gosling. And we also have Louise Busfield with us from the Dorset Police. Thank you.
Good morning, Sergeant Gosling from the Drug and Alcohol Harm Reduction Team.
Is Louise joining us this morning?
I don't believe she is, actually. I think she's got another commitment. I'm sorry.
That's not a problem. Thank you very much indeed. So just to check that everybody has given notice their intention to speak and has been identified, and that anybody who wishes to withdraw any representation or wishes not to speak now, to raise your hand on the raise your hand icon. I'm not seeing anything, so I'll take that as agreed. So I'll go through now the proposed procedure in order of speaking for the hearing as follows. The licensing officer, Sarah Rogers, will present the report, and there'll be questions on points of fact. Read the report. The applicant will make their application, that's Mr. John Payne, and then questions of the applicant by the members, the responsible authorities, any other persons who don't have present today, and the licensing officer. The responsible authorities will then make their representations and questions of the responsible authorities from all other parties. All parties will be given an opportunity to sum up, and the party who spoke last will go first, and the hearing will then conclude. The subcommittee will deliberate in private with legal advisor and clerk present, and due to COVID restrictions, notification of the subcommittee's decision will be given within the period of 5 working days, beginning with the day or the last day of which the hearing was held, which is today, in accordance with the regulations. The notification of the decision will include information about the right of appeal as appropriate, and I will ask at the time for Ms. Coulter to give us that information. Can we also ask that Sarah Rogers, you are with us?
Yes.
Thank you. And Tanya Coulter?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't think I've forgotten anybody. Okay. Finally, I'd like to remind all parties not to repeat the information which they have already given in writing, but to expand on their written representations. All questions are to be asked through the chair, and there's to be no cross-examination of parties. So I'll now ask our licensing officer, Sarah Rogers, if she will present her report. Thank you.
Thank you. The application before you is for the grant of a premises licence for premises which are currently licensed and now wish to include the beach decked area within the scope of the licence. Application is made for regulated entertainment, late night refreshment and the supply of alcohol to replicate the hours already licensed. However, there will be more restriction on the proposed decked area. Should this application be granted, the current licence will be surrendered and this licence will replace it. As a result of the consultation, there were 5 representations under the grounds that to grant the application would undermine the licensing objectives. Successful mediation with environmental health resulted in 2 conditions being agreed with the applicant, and they're set out at paragraph 9 of my report. The representations received from other persons have also been successfully mediated after the applicant met with them individually and discussed the premises proposals with them at the site. Since submission of my report, I can also confirm that Mr. Goodship has now also withdrawn his representation. Therefore, Dorset Police's representation remains, and details of the correspondence between them and the applicant is contained in my report at appendices 4, 5 and 6. No representations were received from any of the other responsible authorities. Should this application be granted and the applicants fail to operate in accordance with the licence and the conditions attached to it, they will be aware that any of the responsible authorities or any other person may request a review of the licence at any time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will just a small oversight on my part. I did not ask all parties to confirm agreement on the proposed procedure, so I will just reflect back on that. I asked Sarah Rogers and I asked Tanya Coulter, but I didn't ask Mr. Payne. Are you happy with the proposed procedure?
Chair, indeed, entirely happy.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Cribb, are you happy?
I am happy. Yeah, I will be speaking. I don't think you mentioned my name. I think you said John, but he'll introduce me for that. But yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Just to check that you were happy with the proposed procedure that I've just been through. I omitted to ask you if you were, and I should do that. And Sergeant Gosling, are you happy with the procedure?
Yes, happy with the procedure, Chair. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. So we've heard from our licensing officer. Are there any questions on points of fact, re her report? I'll ask members first. Any questions? Please indicate by raising your hand. Okay, open to the floor. Are there any questions on points of fact from any other party at this point in time? No, okay, thank you very much, Ms. Rogers.
Thank you.
So, moving on, we will now ask the applicant, who, on behalf of the applicant, Mr. John Payne, to put forward their application. Thank you, Mr. Payne.
Chair, I'm grateful, and indeed, as Mr. Cribb mentioned, we might do this in two parts, if you don't mind. I'll provide a brief introduction to the application, then Mr. Cribb can talk about the aspirations for the premises and what it is, and what the plans are. As you've heard, this is an application for a new premises licence. The main building, if I can call it that, already holds a premises licence, and I think you have a copy of that in your papers. It's a fairly wide licence, and the reality of it is that that licence would allow this deck area that is the subject effectively of the application to be used for the purposes for which it's intended. That is to say, to consume food, because this premises is a restaurant, and to consume alcohol. And what the application actually does is it seeks to promote the licensing objectives by providing the ability for customers on the deck area to order and be delivered from a servery at the deck their products, rather than having to walk across the road and collect. So that's the first point. This is an application for something that could take place anyway, but it is felt that it is appropriate and right and proper to have it in a restricted format under a licence. And as you'll see from the correspondence, we've consulted with the police from the very outset, even before the application went in, and those consultations and negotiations have continued throughout the application process. I'm exceptionally grateful to Sergeant Gosling for his input into that. So that is the application before you. I'll sum up a little at the end, but perhaps if I could hand over to Mr. Cribb, who can explain a little bit more and embellish on what is planned. Hopefully you will have seen the supplementary papers which give some visuals, and it might be helpful to refer to those during his presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Mr. Cribb, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. OK, so I thought it'd be useful just to fill you in on a little bit of history. And we've been working in partnership with BCP and the local community for over a decade now down on Boscombe Peach. And through this partnership, we've played our part in helping transform an area that was once known for syringes under the pier and drug use and public disorder into a family-friendly beach. And a recent visitor survey highlighted that Boscombe Beach now has the highest spend per head along the seafront, also highlighting a positive impact economically as well. And we work with Sorted Surf Shop, the RNLI and the various volleyball clubs, and even the Harvester and the local residents to create a true community space. And continuing this partnership, we've had discussions with BCP over many years about whether to add an additional licensed terrace outside the restaurant, as is the case, I'm sure you're aware, outside many of our competitors dotted along the coastline. And until this time, we've decided that that additional space was unnecessary. However, this year's been really tough, as I'm sure you can imagine, operating with COVID restrictions, either being told to fully close and cease trading or to operate at less capacity. We've lost 40% of our internal covers and 50% in our revenue. So for 2021, this year, we've already completely lost Easter due to regulated closure in what is a very short season down on the seafront. We've lost the first bank holiday due to heavy rain, and the weather continues to make outside dining unviable on many days. And even when we do reopen next week, we have mask distancing, the rule of 6, no events or no parties. And the impact of all of this means that we owe a significant backlog in rent to BCP, a backlog of VAT owed to the HMRC, and have only stayed afloat by borrowing a CBILS-backed NatWest loan, all of which, of course, has to be fully repaid. So we need to be given the opportunity to find a way to trade out of this mess. Otherwise, we make what was once a viable business an unviable one, and it will be forced to close. And I've invested over £1 million into this business in 11 years of my life, and to see it on the brink of failure through no fault of my own is heartbreaking. So at a recent meeting that I had with the leaders of the council, Bournemouth Bounce Back Faster sort of ideas, with Drew Mellor, Philip Broadhead, Deputy Leader, and with Mohan Iyengar, the Cabinet Member for Tourism, Leisure and Culture, we all agreed that this year it did finally make sense to build this deck and to play our part in improving Boscombe Beach. And this new deck and increased licensed area will help us replace the covers that we've lost internally and fulfil the national government objective of creating more eating and drinking space outside, as well as helping the economy rebound and create employment. And very briefly, just, the concept of this is quite simple. It's a quality hardwood deck. It's cantilevered from the promenade. It's 33 metres wide by 5 metres deep, and it will have a servery located at the western end that will be removed in the winter months and installed for the summer months. And this will be a very smart, high quality sort of converted container style, so it can be craned on and off. The exact dates of that will depend on the weather and the school holidays. But importantly, this deck is also to be used by the local community, including local fitness providers. So it's not just our deck. We've got TRX strap classes booked in, yoga classes, general fitness classes, but it will also replace those 65 covers that have been lost from our internal space. So this is not an additional provision, it's a movement of existing provision. So just to fill you in as to why we need that variation, operationally, shifting our service from inside to outside creates quite a lot of operational challenges. Inside, we've obviously got large bar serving areas, kitchen passes for food and drink, and whilst these spaces can cope from a demand perspective, they're not well placed for the new location of that demand outside on the deck. So expecting my team to carry food and drink up and down stairs and over a busy promenade area is quite complex and potentially dangerous. So it makes much more sense to serve people operationally where they are already located. And serving food and drink at peak times from the new deck directly will improve efficiency, and it will keep people safer from COVID by encouraging less mingling. And if we have queues, it keeps people further apart. And I think it's worth remembering this was not our idea. We didn't suggest that the government remove 40% of our covers and move the location of our guests away from our existing service points. But what we have done is we've invested the £70,000 in the new deck and the new servery to play our part in trying to solve this problem. And it's really imperative to me that this is now supported with the necessary legislative and licensing support. And just to fill you in on a couple of other quick areas around that, customer service is a key thing. So if this new terrace is not licensed, we have to ask customers to queue at the existing service points. And it will be farcical from a customer service perspective for customers to be expected to queue at different locations depending on the product that they wish to purchase. Customers will become annoyed, and understandably, I think it's down to our incompetence as to why we cannot look after them better, and that will tarnish our well-earned reputation as an intelligent and customer-focused business. And the harm to our business of having to find creative ways to work around any kind of unnecessary bureaucracy could be immeasurable and make what is currently a supported, viable local business the focus of ridicule for customers. So remember, this is not about whether the customer can buy a drink. They can already do that at Urban Reef and the Wood Oven. This is just about them being able to buy that drink at the newly located servery on the deck, which is about 30 feet from our existing provision. Now, I know the council have been keen to work on helping the economy bounce back. So just to put into context, we employ between 30 and 60 people, depending on the time of year, when we are running as a viable business. We're a good training ground for the young. We pay significant sums of national insurance into the national economy, good wages with local people who spend that money in the local community. We buy from local suppliers, keeping money local and creating local jobs. And we pay hundreds of thousands of pounds in VAT, tens of thousands of pounds in business rate and rent to BCP. We host business meetings and events and many other local businesses who further contribute to the local economy and community. And this deck will help the business bounce back and continue those positive contributions. And I think it's worth noticing that we are very good custodians in ensuring the licensing objectives are met. We are the very best custodians of Boscombe Beach because we're on site from dawn until dusk, 364 days of the year. We employ a team of professionals who help police the beach every single day of the year. We've got a comprehensive CCTV system with 19 cameras around the building, and the management team have worked at Urban Reef for many years and have their own families, all aged between 40 and 50, and we can be trusted to operate professionally without over-regulation. Remember, when we are open, we are well placed to meet the 4 licensing objectives. We reduce antisocial behaviour, crime and disorder by being the eyes and ears on the beach. We've already helped transform the beach, and it's now a family area, meeting the objective of protecting children from harm and enhancing public safety. And quality assets attract quality guests who help regulate each other. Scallywags do not want to be around peers where they do not feel welcome. And Urban Reef is not operated by a local nightclubbing thug and has never operated to try and let hooligans on the beach drunk whilst lining the pockets of the owner. It's an innovative asset with a great deal of local support, and it's earned the right to be given the benefit of the doubt and be allowed to continue to do its work in transforming Boscombe Beach. And I know one of the other key concerns of the police and the council is that the beach is going to be too busy this year. And it's worth noting that most of the year, the beach is not overly busy. Most of the time, visitors have hundreds of metres of space to themselves. The beach is only busy on warm and sunny days. And most of the year, once the sun drops, it's too cold to enjoy a drink outside in the evening. So the beach will be busy on glorious days, whether this licence is granted or not. I do understand that, but we will be lucky to get 30 warm enough evenings in the whole year where we will face significant demands. And if on any of those possible 30 days, the atmosphere changes from happy people enjoying time with loved ones to a feeling of being a little bit more edgy, we simply stop serving guests outside. We've done it before and we do it again. And no piece of paper influences whether we make that decision. We make it because we're professional, decent, ethical human beings looking after other human beings. We always want to be part of the solution rather than the problem. We've worked hard to create a local community of support and will not jeopardise that to serve a few stupid people alcohol on a few random days of the year. Last year, we turned almost the whole of Urban Reef into a takeaway to cope with COVID distancing regulations. As is well publicised, the beach was busy, but the atmosphere around Urban Reef was fantastic. We remained a force for good and did not contribute to the problems and did not require police support. And finally, I would just have a little plea on behalf of British hospitality. More than ever, we have an opportunity to give British hospitality the recognition and support it deserves. All too often derided by the press and the police as the bad guy getting people drunk and encouraging antisocial behaviour. This is a really sad and depressing state of affairs. Hospitality employs 3.5 million people and it is the happiness barometer of the country. It's the centre of humanity where we celebrate each other's achievements and commiserate each other's losses. It's a training ground for the young, giving them confidence and lifelong skills in work and ethics. We've all missed it this year more than ever. And we've finally seen some of its greatest business leaders stand up and demonstrate to Parliament why we're the third largest sector of the economy and why finally we should be given more understanding and respect. Please do not vilify hospitality and people having a beer. If we are ever to stand tall and compete with our global great cities, we need to support local businesses who specialise in looking after local people and provide genuine hospitality. Not to do so would be a very sad day for being human, so please do not let a bit of paper ever become more important than being a good human being. Thanks for the time.
Okay. Thank you.
Chair,
Yeah, wait 1 moment, Mr. Payne, just while I note that last remark. Thank you, Mr. Payne.
Chair, I don't think that I can really embellish much more on what Mr. Cribb has mentioned and covered. I think it's fair to say that a lot of it can be summed up, especially in view of the police concerns, in that this is a premises that is a force for good. It is not a premises that indulges in serving scallywags, as Mr. Cribb eloquently put it. What is intended here is a responsible premises, continuing on the good reputation. Now, in terms of the representation that's been received, you'll see that there has been discussions with the police, and as I say, I'm grateful for that. And we seem to be reduced down to a point, not whether a licence should be granted, but what the terms and the conditions of that licence should be. And I don't think I need to go through the summary that's on page 73 onwards. Maybe that's something for a discussion in a moment. But you'll see that this is a premises that wants to act responsibly, wants to have sensible and proportionate conditions for what it's doing at the particular premises. Madam Chairman, that is the application. As I say, I can really embellish no more on what Mr. Cribb has most eloquently put forward to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Payne. Firstly, I think before I ask questions of members, just to state that we heard a laudable business case, Mr. Cribb, but we unfortunately, we're not here to consider business cases, and we have no intention of vilifying hospitality. That isn't our remit. Our remit is to uphold the 4 licensing objectives. So obviously we could never consider profit or loss or employment issues or business cases, but just to assure you of that we will be looking to uphold the 4 licensing objectives within your application. But your business case is laudable, so thank you. So I will ask then now, are there any questions of the applicant, that's Mr. Payne or Mr. Cribb, from members? Councillor Burton, do you have any questions at this time?
Not at this time, thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Anderson, do you have any questions at this time?
No questions at this time, thank you, Chair.
Okay. I have a few, and it's just for confirmation, really. For the avoidance of doubt, just to confirm that the application is with regard to the decking area on the beach, and it is to run from the hours of 8 a.m. in the morning until 11 o'clock at night, 7 days a week. Just for confirmation, because the way in which
Yes, Chair, let me deal with it this way, if I may. The application is essentially an application that covers the existing licensed area.
Yes, I'm aware of that. I'm aware of that.
And the deck, yes.
With regard to that, sorry, Mr. Payne, if you'd let me finish. I'm asking with regard to the variation, what does that entail? And I'm just asking for confirmation with regard to the variation, not the licence sitting in itself.
Yes, Chair. I think this is where there's a little confusion, because it's not a variation. It's a brand new licence application to cover both the existing premises and the deck. The intention being that if that licence is granted to cover both areas, then the existing licence for the restaurant is no longer needed and can be surrendered. That's the principle. So it's not a variation, it's a brand new license.
The word variation is not used in its legal sense. The word addition to the license, Mr. Payne.
Very well, indeed. So this yes. You appreciate there's a legal nicety that I need to deal with here, but yep. That's perfectly all right. If we talk about it in terms of the variation, then that we are looking at the deck area, yes, the intention is 8 o'clock till 11 o'clock. That is the time that that part of the premises would be used. And as you heard from Mr. Cribb, actually, the reality is that for much of the year, it probably wouldn't be used during those hours, just simply because there is no call for it.
Okay, thank you. My second question is with regard to the outlined area in red on the beach, the decked area. There is on the plan a connecting area for transit, and that isn't licensed. So that is just for people to walk from the premise to the decking area.
Chair, again, so yeah. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Yes, just to deal with that particular point, that is a technical point again, to make sure that there is a continuity between the two parts of the premises. It wouldn't be possible.
Mr. Payne, you're really preempting my question. So if you allow me to have my preamble and my question, but
I'm sorry, I will
my question, and I thank you for your answer. And I was just also asking that this is a piece of raised decking on the sand, and with regard to the public passing between the premise and the decked area, what provisions made there?
Yeah. Do you want me to answer that, John?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Cribb.
Yeah, so yeah, it's cantilevered off of the promenade basically. So you've always had a gap there. It's actually part of the highway, that bit of promenade. So vehicles can go past as they were. That's not affected. There's some stone bollards around the existing deck, and behind those stone bollards is for disabled, potentially, if the other space is being used as a highway. But all that remains as is. In reality, obviously, in the busy periods, there's people milling around in that space. But if any vehicles come through, they're just let through, and that's always been the case.
So that remains the same. OK, thank you for that. Those are my questions at the moment. I will now move on to Sergeant Gosling. Do you have any questions for the applicants?
No questions at this time, Chair. Thank you.
OK, thank you. And Sarah Rogers, our licensing officer, do you have any questions for the applicant with regard to your?
No, I don't. Thank you very much.
OK, thank you very much. So moving on then to responsible authorities, it's now your opportunity to put forward your submission. Thank you, Sergeant Gosling.
Thank you very much, Chair. So summer 2021 looks set to be one of our busiest periods of demand for many years as COVID-19 restrictions ease and we see the return of key public events. Set against the backdrop of continued restrictions on international travel, more and more people are expected to visit Dorset for day trips and staycations than ever before. We expect the numbers of people travelling into Dorset this summer for a staycation to be high. And this will, of course, lead to us having a really busy summer period, especially between 1st of April, sort of the end of September. And we're committed to resourcing this demand throughout the summer to ensure that we continue to provide effective services to our community. And as part of that planning, additional patrols have been allocated to key hotspot areas, including the beaches at Bournemouth. We will be working proactively with our partner agencies to coordinate and strengthen plans to keep residents and visitors safe. This includes daily and weekly meetings where key information is shared with our partners. Officers from our BCP neighbourhood policing team will be part of the multi-agency command control, which is based on Bournemouth seafront to ensure that we can respond effectively to the demand from these very busy and popular areas. We are aware crimes increase during the summer, and we will prioritise resources accordingly. And my concern is that this significant extension of an existing provision will risk placing a further burden on our resources at the peak times. In respect of this application, mediation has taken place with the applicant, which we're grateful. And whilst each application is assessed on its own merits, we commenced the mediation by inviting the applicant to consider implementation of some or all of the conditions that were recently agreed by the BCP Council Licensing Committee in a recent hearing related to 5 applications for locations along the same stretch of coastline as this application, the nearest site being about half a mile from this one. So we're not here to discuss the pros and cons of that, but I just wanted to give you a background as to where we started the mediation. So some of the proposed conditions would of course need amendment to ensure that they were suitable for this provision. However, we aim to achieve some level of consistency to ensure that the operator could continue to promote the licensing objectives. And I know that you will have some detail within the appendices, but just to highlight some of the key conditions that were agreed to. The first being operation of a town watch radio, and there's also been an agreement to risk assess the need for SIA security. It's been agreed that the license holder will implement an evacuation plan in respect of the premises and also introduce a refusals log. Staff members will be conversant with the CCTV at all times, so that at least will be one person who's able to operate the CCTV, and an incident log will be introduced. There will be an introduction of a premises management plan, and Challenge 25, which I'm sure you're familiar, will be promoted to discourage underage alcohol sales. There will be a procedure in place for dealing with unwell members of the public, which we do often see along the beaches, especially during those really hot days. And the personal license holder will be available when alcohol is being offered for sale. And finally, there will be a dispersal policy implemented alongside no promotional sales of alcohol below the prices already in place at the existing premises. So I'll now move on to really the reason why we continue to make an objection. So the areas that we have yet to be able to agree are as follows. So the first being attendance at town watch meetings. For me, this is considered a key condition in all licenses, as this is a fantastic opportunity for licensees to share information and to receive updates from police and other authorities as to the local issues that they will need to consider. Whilst the applicant has offered attendance during the times that the deck is operating, we would consider that attendance be appropriate at all times that the premises is in operation. Secondly, accredited training. This can now be completed online and is considered best practice. Unfortunately, I have experienced some very poor standard training in the past at other premises, which, whilst it is considered training by definition, fails to deliver the key points and ensure that the person receiving the training can operate to the highest standards that we would expect. Whilst in-house training is excellent for ensuring that the staff member understands the particular business that they work within, we would view this as additional training to familiarise them with their working environment. Next was in relation to safety checks to be completed on a weekly basis. Mr. Payne had a very good point, and we accept that this is a requirement of the health and safety at work requirement. However, we consider that given the location of this area, it would be beneficial to ensure that the deck area and equipment be examined on a weekly basis to ensure that it remains safe for all users, both during and outside of operating hours. Next is a very sort of specific condition that is really based upon the planning aspect of what we have been doing alongside our partners. And it relates to the stepped approach for uplifting resources such as security during the most peak times. We would expect that the business conduct their own risk assessment as per the agreed condition. However, given the specific location and the risks that are presented by the volume of people anticipated to visit Bournemouth beaches this year, we would ask that the committee impose a condition that enables police and other responsible authorities to require an uplift in resources if necessary. We do not anticipate that this would be used, as we have planned significantly to meet the demand for this summer period. However, in the event that the beaches become overwhelmed, as they did last year when a major incident was declared in June, we need the ability to request that licensees support the uplift in public authority and police resources as required, as this is what we as public authorities will be expected to do. We also accept that the premises itself will conduct a risk assessment. We will have access to up-to-date data that is not publicly available, and we would ask that we have the ability to require support from this operator, as we have done for the previous applications on Bournemouth Beach, without the need for a prolonged dialogue. Next is a concern around drinks being served in glass vessels.
Sergeant Gosling, I'd be extremely grateful if, as you went on to each of your conditions, if you would give us the number, just for reference. I'm following you to date, but I might get out of line. I'd be grateful.
No problem. I'll see if I can refer back. I don't have that document in front of me. Let me see if I can.
I think we've just referred to item 4. Which is with regard to the safety checks maintained by the operator for inspection. I think item 5 is satisfied. We're now on to item 6.
Yes, it's in relation to drinks being served in glass vessels. I do apologise for that, Chair.
It just makes it rather awkward because we have a nice long list of 24 with all the reasons from Mr. Payne with regard to why he is not satisfied with your request for these. And we're not quite sure where we are in the list. With regard to your presentation.
Okay. If it would be beneficial to the committee, I'm happy to provide a kind of detail, a written detail of the concerns in that order, if you like. But I was reluctant to do so because that would be, if you like, undermining my presentation. So I'm happy to provide details of that in a written format that suits.
That's absolutely fine, and I'm sure we'll be happy to have those with regard to our deliberations. I'd just be extremely grateful if you can give us some intonation as to when you're going through your submission as to which point and which condition you're wanting us to consider. We can see the ones which are agreed, but it's the ones which are not satisfied as yet.
Okay, let me see. I just okay. So there aren't too many left, in fairness. So well. So I'm talking about the one in relation to glass vessels at the moment.
Okay, we'll find that.
Okay. So whilst this premises currently enjoys the ability to serve alcohol consumption off-site without a condition requiring off-sales to be in plastic containers, this is not something that would be approved by Dorset Police in the current climate. So they do have the benefit of that at the moment with that licence. Serving alcohol in plastic or polycarbonate vessels in open spaces has become best practice, and whilst it's difficult to implement a condition to the existing licence, I would ask that the subcommittee consider implementing a condition requiring only plastic vessels to be used for any service from this deck area in order to promote the best practice and ensure the operator can promote the licensing objective of public safety, as we're all too familiar with the injuries that can be caused through injuries sustained by broken glass on the beach. So the next point I have, Chair, is in relation to the CCTV coverage.
Thank you.
Okay. So once again, it's best practice that, thank you very much. Once again, it's best practice that CCTV is used to capture evidential quality images of those entering the premises and being served alcohol. Also, I accept that there may be a financial implication to putting CCTV in place covering this space, given that it's likely to be extremely popular. Cost should not be a factor in ensuring that the safety of the public is maintained, and that in the event of crime or disorder, the police and other responsible authorities can properly investigate any reported incidents. Once again, this condition was accepted by the applicants in the 5 other recent applications for premises on Bournemouth Beach, and this demonstrates that this condition is achievable. Having a camera simply pointing towards the deck space from the main premises would be insufficient for evidential purposes. The next point I have is around securing furniture and maintaining security, especially around alcohol products. And we would ask that the subcommittee please impose a condition, as was proposed, which requires that the trading space is secured sufficiently when the premises is not in use. We do experience crime and antisocial behaviour targeted towards beach huts and commercial buildings. And whilst I accept that the premises has a 24-hour licence, I would ask that the condition cover the hours which the premises are not in operation. Thank you, Mr. Payne. That relates to number 14. There are only 2 more to go, and the next is in relation to the off sales. As we've discussed in previous hearings, it's a significant concern for Dorset Police, especially in an open space where there is anticipated to be high levels of footfall and significant challenges when trying to manage proxy sales of alcohol to minors. I accept that the premises has an existing off sales provision. However, we would ask that the subcommittee seek to restrict this to the main building only, as there is concern that having such a visible kiosk on the beach will further promote alcohol consumption, which does not promote the intention of BCP Council to provide a family-friendly environment in these open spaces. The proposed condition to restrict alcohol consumption alongside a table meal further promotes alcohol being a secondary offering to food and serves to ensure that this does not become a bar which can be used up to the proposed 11 p.m. closing time. I would ask that finally that consideration be given to imposing a condition which prohibits the advertisement of alcohol to those outside the footprint of the licensable areas. This again seeks to promote a family-friendly environment and promotes food as the primary offering. So they're the areas that we have unfortunately been unable to agree during mediation. And as you all know from our previous subcommittee attendance in relation to the other applications on the beach, it's exactly the same on this occasion. We are not opposed to this provision. However, we want to bring to the attention the anticipated risk that we consider this provision will present, in particular during peak times. Dorset Police and our partners are committed to delivering exceptional service to the visitors to Bournemouth Beach, and we feel that this proposal, without the proposed conditions, might risk undermining the efforts that we have undertaken in the planning phase in advance of this summer season. Thank you very much. I've gone on for a little bit longer than I anticipated, but I'm happy to receive any questions.
Thank you, Sergeant Gosling. I'll ask my colleagues first if they have any questions, and then I have some questions. So, Councillor Anderson, do you have any questions for Councillor Gosling at this moment?
Not at this moment.
Councillor Anderson, I can always come back to you. Councillor Burton?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Likewise as me, not at this moment.
Okay, thank you. I do have questions, but I will need the assistance of the applicant to answer some of these through you, Sergeant Gosling. But firstly, can we just see what we have on the table? We've run through the conditions and the reasoning as to why you're still unhappy as to why some of them aren't applied. And you've raised quite a few but not the full 24, I think. You've raised quite a few that you'd really like to be imposed. I don't think I got them all. I think one was regard to the officers having access with regard to safety checks. Was that correct? Could you run through the conditions you ended up with that you would now like to be added and imposed? Please, Sergeant Gosling.
Okay. Yep. So the main ones are, I guess, in headline format would be attendance at town watch meetings.
Okay.
Accredited training.
Okay, so do you have the 24 conditions in front of you now?
I don't yet, I'm afraid.
Okay, so attendance at town watch, premises operate, maintain a text and radio link, whichever used by town watch. That's all been agreed, yes?
Yes, that's in relation to the radio. I think it's number 2.
Yes, sorry, I shall put that then as condition 1. That's at item 2. Members, that's condition 1 from Sergeant Gosling, and it seems to be item 2 or condition 2 of the list that we have in front of us. Thank you, Sergeant Gosling, if you'd like to continue.
Thank you. Just bear with me. I'm going to try and get I feel that having that information in front of me would be useful. I
think it would be.
Yeah.
It is there. It's available in your pack.
It is. It's unfortunate. I've concentrated on my presentation than having available to me on my relatively small laptop.
Note to self: background paper.
Bear with me just a moment. Okay. I'll try and reference them for you.
Yes, if you want to go in numerical order, that would be good.
Okay, so I'll be bouncing back and forth, but essentially it's the first one is around attendance at Town Watch meetings. The next being accredited training, which
is number what?
Number 3.
Okay, that's condition. So that's the condition you'd also like. That's condition 2 then.
Yep. And then
condition 2 at item 3. Yes.
Yes. Number 4, which is in relation to ensuring that the weekly safety checks are completed at the site.
It's condition 3 at condition. It's condition 3 at condition item number 4. Yes, thank you. Condition 5 is agreed.
Yeah, condition 5 is agreed. Next is condition number 6.
We'll call it condition A, B, and C because we're going to get confused with numbers. So we'll use lettering. So that's fine. So we go on to condition D then. Thank you. To your next condition, and which condition it applies to?
Number 6.
Okay, so that's condition D. Thank you.
Number 7, number 8 are agreed.
They are indeed.
The drugs policy, I believe, is agreed as well. In relation to the glass containers at number 10, that would be something that we would seek the committee's condition if possible.
Okay, so you're not asking for a condition there then. Thank you.
Number 11. That relates to the CCTV being required to an evidential standard.
So that's condition E.
Number 12 is agreed. Number 13 is agreed.
Ahead, Sergeant Gosling, we're writing this all down, trying to make sure we've got all the information in front of us in order to draw our decision. So 12 is agreed and 13 is agreed. G is written out. Any visit by relevant authority or emergency service.
Yes, I'm unsure why that was removed because that is quite a common condition that is accepted by various applicants. So perhaps Mr. Payne can elaborate on that further in due course.
Thank you.
Number 14, we would ask that given the level of crime that we experience with buildings, both commercial and beach huts, etc., that certainly the alcohol areas are properly secured.
That's condition F, yes.
Number 15 is agreed, as is 16.
Okay, it doesn't look agreed here. This, our interpretation is number of persons permitted in the premises at any one time, including staff, should not exceed the number stated within the. I think this might be.
It's part in relation.
So it's a verbiage. It's a verbiage correction.
Yes.
Agreed. However, okay. So it's agreed subject to verbiage. Fine. Thank you. So moving on to the next condition.
That would be number 16 in relation to challenge 25. That's agreed.
That's agreed.
As is number 17.
Yep, that's agreed. Fine.
And number 18 was a significant factor for us in relation to consumption of alcohol alongside a table meal. And just to be clear on that would be intended to cover pre-meal drinks. Of course, would be permitted, as would post-meal drinks, but it would be ensuring that the guest was there for the primary function of utilising the premises as a restaurant.
Right, thank you. And that's condition G.
Number 19. That one hasn't been agreed, but we haven't raised that one as a particular issue, given the fact that Mr. Payne has given reassurances.
There seems to be some negation of that, or certainly mitigated.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
we don't have a condition to add to that, right? So that's something for the committee's consideration. Thank you. So moving on then, we to the next condition.
Absolutely. Number 20 is agreed. And 21 is, of course, a significant issue in relation to consumption off the premises. And that's something, again, for the consideration of the subcommittee, given that the premises already enjoys an off-sales permission with regards to
You're
the
asking for a condition here, though, Sergeant Gosling.
Yes, we are.
Fine, that's not a problem. That's condition H.
Thank you. Number 22, again, that one has been agreed. Number 23 is in relation to the advertisement of alcohol, and perhaps we could have made it clearer there that the primary issue that we're concerned with is with regards to that advertisement of alcohol. I know it's not something that is particularly routinely done at this premises, but once again, it would be useful to ensure that we don't just promote alcohol and more promote the presence of the premises as a restaurant in the,
So it does rather, yes, I see your point. It does rather read starkly differently. If no advertisement of any kind regarding alcohol is placed in there, that might be something.
Absolutely.
I see your point. So that it doesn't seem as stark as what is written there. Thank you very much for that.
We did address that. I think that did come out as part of the previous hearings, and that's something that we're taking forward. But this mediation was already underway. And finally, number 24 was agreed in relation to the dispersal policy.
A to I. Okay.
And thank you, Mr. Payne, for us in the comments box there.
Yes, go on, Sergeant Gosling. Go on.
I think yes, so we're completed now. That's the they're the ones that
there are 9 conditions which are outstanding, which is A to I. Okay, thank you for that. So I think Sergeant Gosling, after your representation, there's an opportunity now for Mr. Payne to ask questions, and it may be that Mr. Payne, in his questioning, would like to provide some of that information which sits around those extra conditions, A to I. Hope he has them all. That would be extremely helpful to the committee. Mr. Payne, your chance to ask questions of.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm trying to work, if I may, actually from page 73 of the committee papers, which has this annotation. That it might be more helpful to go with that, because I think we're going to get confused with A and G. Yeah.
Well, for purposes of as we only had we only had your list, which was saying as to why you were not happy. We didn't have a list from Sergeant Gosling as to say as to why he was not further happy with the way you were. So I'm very happy to go from that list, but the conditions A to I now have written down, which I didn't before, so I know exactly what they are. So just to check with members, I do have page 73. Is that available to you? So, Mr. Payne, now, if you'd like to continue, thank you.
Well, indeed. Sergeant Gosling, I wonder if I could just deal with some of these requirements, which are statutory requirements already. And on page 73, I'm sorry, just one moment. Yes, page 73, there's the reference to checking. And I've made mention of the Health and Safety at Work Act. What you said.
Give us the number of the condition you're.
Yes, of course. It's condition 4, which is crossed through. A suitably trained and competent person must ensure weekly safety checks of the premises. You said that was a good idea, but obviously a little more is needed in order to overcome the burden of the Secretary of State's guidance that statutory requirements should not be replicated in licence conditions. Given that is a statutory requirement, would you be content with that condition 4 about training to come out in the knowledge that it happens anyway?
Okay, thank you for that.
Yes, if the subcommittee see it fit, then I have no issue with that at all.
Thank you, Sergeant Gosling. That's extremely helpful. Thank you, Mr. Payne. If you'd like to continue.
Thank you. If I could move down to what is perhaps slightly contentious on page 74 and condition 6 for councillors. If there's a formal multi-agency stepped process for escalation of resources. Now, this is obviously a condition that potentially could impose a very onerous burden on the premises if you decide that, I don't know, 20 door supervisors are required. Now, I'm not anticipating that because the police are reasonable in all this, that they're going to suddenly turn around and yes, you've got to provide 20 door supervisors. But what would happen if there was no agreement on what you require, given that with any license condition, obviously there needs to be some, any licensing decision, there needs to be some form of appeal. How could that decision be challenged?
What we would see,
item 6. Thank you, Sergeant Gosling.
so what we would seek to do would be to sit down with the operator and discuss the stepped approach. So without going into too much detail, essentially, we have a process in place with the police and other partners that where certain trigger points happen with regards to certain stresses, strains on the beach, whether that be volume of people, certain demands increasing, it would mean that we would have an agreed working policy, if you like, with the operator as part of a plan to ensure that if we were to step up that approach, to step up the requirements on the beach, and that would include, of course, stepping up the numbers of police, which is not an easy thing to do, then we would have an agreed plan in place with the operator to do the same at their premises if it was considered appropriate.
Yeah.
You have your answer.
I think in part I do. The condition as set out at the moment talks about staff rather than security personnel, of course. So with that, it seems that it would be possible for the police to say to the premises, well, we want an extra 10 serving staff. That's not your intention, is it?
Absolutely not.
Okay, through me, thank you. If you'd like to answer that, Sergeant Gosling, thank you.
Absolutely not. I think to probably give a fairly reasonable working example, and again, it would need to be finalised. But if, for example, there was, I don't know, step 1, step 2, and step 3 in the worst case scenario, it may well be that step 1 is that it remains as is. So there's a risk assessment in place. It may well be that step 2 requires there to be a presence of SIA. And it may well be that step 3 requires there to be, say, for example, a minimum of 2 SIA. That would be the type of situation we would be looking at, and only where step 3 would be where we experience a significant strain or a significant concern with regards to the beach. And for me, it promotes the ability to work well with our operators because we view the operators as partners, and when there are such large footprints that we're talking about on the beaches in very busy areas, it's important that we work in collaboration with those operators.
Thank you. Through you again, you Chair.
Yes.
The police, as you will know, have powers of closure in the case of crime and disorder, which could be proposed. Again, through you, Chair, could I suggest that perhaps the police might like to consider, rather than this condition 6, it would be appropriate to look at condition 5, which talks about security staff, and to impose within that condition the requirement that in carrying out the risk assessment, advice that's given by the police must be taken into account as part of that assessment. Of course, if the police are saying, well, I think you need an extra couple of door supervisors, that needs to be built into the risk assessment. And then likewise with the premises management plan, to include that provision would again surely satisfy the aim.
Sergeant Gosling.
Yes, I mean, if you see fit as the subcommittee to do so, we just feel that having a specific tailor-made condition appropriate for premises on the beach would better suit. However, If you see it fit to incorporate that within other conditions, then of course you're free to do so. And I'm acutely aware of the ability then to conduct closure orders, etc., if required, where those risk assessments lead to crime and disorder.
Thank you very much, Sergeant Gosling. That's helpful. If you'd like to continue, Mr. Payne.
Chair, indeed, I'm very grateful to Sergeant Gosling for that. He is quite right. The conditions have to be tailored to the premises, as he said. And these conditions at the moment are, of course, a set of, I wouldn't call them standard conditions, but they are conditions that have been applied to other premises. So I'm grateful that he seems to agree to that. Given, especially in view of the evidence you've heard from Mr. Cribb, where he has referred to closing the premises rather than serving scallywags, and indeed from being overwhelmed, I would suggest that the evidence is there that he will take any advice that's put into place. So I think we are at the point where condition 6 perhaps does fall away. In terms of where we go from here, excuse me while I just scroll through. Could I just check through you again, Chair, that the police agree that if somebody, well, let's deal with it this way. If there was a condition on the beach area that no off-sales could be made, it would be perfectly possible for someone to be directed into the main premises and then buy an off-sale there.
Sergeant Gosling, would you like to answer that?
Yes, I accept that's possible given the licence that is in existence at this time.
Would you agree, therefore, that the condition is perhaps unnecessary to ban off sales at this particular venue, because literally by walking 30 feet in another direction, they can buy at the main premises?
Would you like to refer to the condition, please, Mr. Payne?
Indeed, it's excuse me one moment. Condition 21.
Thank you.
There should be no sales of alcohol consumption off the premises.
Thank you, Sergeant Gosling. Thank you.
Off-sales provision for us has always been a significant concern, especially in the beach areas. And whilst I accept that it is available as it stands from the existing premises, I am familiar with the premises, very familiar that its appearance as a restaurant is unlikely to attract those that are wishing to remove alcohol from the premises. It's more likely to attract those wishing for a restaurant environment, as Mr. Cribb is intending to achieve. And my thoughts are that having a mobile kiosk, or I think Mr. Cribb described it as something else, but essentially a temporary structure would encourage further off sales, which we feel would risk undermining the licensing objectives.
Thank you, Sergeant Gosling. Obviously, there's a difficulty there because the licence already in train provides this, so it's difficult there to difficulty sits around that with regard to the legalities of the licence. But we will take that for our deliberations. So if you'd like to continue, Mr. Payne, with your questioning.
Indeed. So if I can go back, I should have covered this before. Condition 3, I think we are disagreeing to agree here, rather than agreeing to disagree. I think that, would you agree that training that's non-specific to the premises should be provided by an accredited trainer? So if it's training in relation to the licensing objectives, that should be done by an accredited trainer. Yeah, that's where you're coming from with condition 3.
Absolutely. It's just identifying. Sorry, Chair.
Okay, carry on.
So yes, I think it's about being clear that there is a very distinct difference between on-site in-house training and Licensing Act training, which we do often see being combined, and sometimes in favour of more the in-house operational aspect of things rather than the Licensing Act. So accredited training for me would be best practice.
Yeah.
Okay.
However, would you agree with me that accredited training, for instance, an online course or even an attended course, wouldn't necessarily cover the specific conditions for this license, or indeed the age verification policy for this premises? Because if you are running an accredited course, generally, would you agree that there probably will be a number of different premises there with different premises licenses? Yeah.
Sergeant Gosling?
Yes, I would. It covers the key points of the Licensing Act, and then it would be for the licence holder or DPS to provide the training in addition to that training to ensure that the specific licence is understood.
So with the amendment that I've suggested to condition 3, that the training specific to the premises, i.e. the conditions of the licence, the age verification policy, that can be done in-house, can't it?
Sergeant Gosling, yes, I think the answer there is yes. Sergeant Gosling?
Yes, it is, yeah.
So effectively what we're doing is we're agreeing condition 3 as I've amended, yes?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
great.
Thank you. Happy to accept that. Thank you very much. And that is agreed. Thank you. Would you like to continue?
Indeed, condition 14 talks about locking the area away, and you've heard about the servery that's proposed. It's a matter of course that this will be locked. It's probably unnecessary to have it as a condition. Once trading has concluded, trading will conclude, the servery will be locked down. Would you agree that it's probably unnecessary to have condition 14, which talks about alcohol in the trading areas to be secured behind locked grills? Because once the shutters comes down, it will be locked anyway.
Sergeant Gosling?
The purpose of that condition is to ensure that licensees don't underestimate the risk of leaving alcohol available to those that wish to try and force entry and that sort of thing. So in relation to the locked grills, that's intended to be behind locked doors or some other facility to ensure that it is entirely safe.
But you wouldn't seek to...
I'll just ask for a point of clarification there, if I may. For both parties. You're stating, Sergeant Gosling, that you require the alcohol to be behind grills or screens or cabinet doors. So in fact, there is a closure to where the alcohol is segregated in the room, and it not be the room itself that is locked and secure. Is that
Absolutely.
What you're saying?
Essentially, it's ensuring that alcohol during the times of non-operation, if you like, that the alcohol is securely locked away.
Okay, much like the cigarettes are locked away in a supermarket behind those grills. It's a similar sort of thing, if that's helpful. Thank you. Mr. Payne?
Chair, the point that I think I'm trying to get to is that alcohol is stored, or would be stored with this licence within the servery, which itself is one room. People don't have access to it. It will be just locked at the end of the day. Effectively, what this condition is asking is, if you were equate this to a pub. If you are a pub, you'll lock the front door when you leave. That's what it's asking for. It's perhaps a little unnecessary because the container will be locked up anyway.
Okay, Sergeant Gosling, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I just think, again, without wishing to repeat myself, I don't want the challenge underestimated as far as these mobile units are concerned. I have had information from crime prevention officers to suggest that these temporary units tend to be far more vulnerable to attack from those wishing to get what's inside. So it's about making sure that either the appropriate advice is obtained to make sure that it's locked, but to ensure that challenge is not underestimated.
Thank you very much, Sergeant Gosling. Mr. Payne, if you'd like to move on.
Indeed, condition 18, which is the supply of alcohol at premises, shall only be to a person seated taking a table meal there and for consumption by such persons ancillary to their meal. Again, you've touched on this, that you wouldn't anticipate that touches on pre-dinner drinks, and so if that condition were to impose, some wording around that would need to be included, wouldn't it?
Sergeant Gosling?
Yes, it's intended to cover it's intended to cover customers who were there for the primary purpose of consuming food, and that the alcohol is ancillary to that purpose.
Okay, so do you have any clarification with regard to wording that you'd like, Sergeant Gosling?
No, I don't think it's necessary. I think as long as they're there for the primary function, I think it's covered within that condition.
Well,
Okay.
Chair, if I could just address you on that, it says quite clearly, supply of alcohol at the premises shall only to be to a person seated taking a table meal and for consumption by such a person as ancillary to their meal. So in order to sell to somebody, they would actually have to be seated at a table. These are the words that are there, and taking a table meal at the time. That doesn't cover pre-drinks.
I would agree with that, Mr. Payne, but I would also ask Sergeant Gosling that is the stark definition, but obviously that's not what you're asking for. So would you like to put into words what it is that you're asking for with regard to that condition, and we can note them?
So I'm quite happy for the condition to be amended if necessary, of course, and it could include such detail as customers wishing to enjoy a pre-dinner drink or a post-dinner drink, if that would be fit for yourselves and Mr. Payne.
Well, can I make a suggestion to perhaps push this forward? I'm conscious we're spending perhaps a little too much time on this, but if it were added at the end, or persons intending to partake of a meal at the end of that condition, yeah, or persons that have partaken of a meal. So that just neatly wraps it up and covers everything I think that you want.
Okay, all persons intending to partake of a meal, we'll add that as a condition, and with respect, Mr. Payne, will take as long as we need with regard to this application.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, so I have that wording for that condition. Are you content with that condition as amended, Mr. Payne?
Excuse me, will I just take instructions? I wonder if I could first take the point that would the police officer agree that it is possible, or it would be possible under the current licence, for somebody to buy alcohol at the main premises and then go and sit down in the decked area, whether or not they're having a meal?
Sergeant Gosling, would you like to answer that?
Yes, that's possible under the existing licence.
Yeah. So given that somebody can already go and sit in that area with a drink that they've purchased, do you still feel that that condition 18 is necessary?
Sergeant
Yes, they can buy the alcohol and sit there anyway, and it's going to be quite.
Mr. Payne, you've made your point. If you'd allow Sergeant Gosling to answer, thank you.
Yes, so I believe
Gosling,
that condition.
I'd like to answer that, thank you. You would agree that?
Yes, I believe that condition would be appropriate for that area. Yes.
Okay. Mr. Payne?
In terms of enforcing that condition, how would you expect that the premises would try and differentiate between people who'd bought alcohol in the main premises and people who'd bought at the servery?
That would be one for the premises to manage. We're talking specifically around the alcohol being purchased from the servery.
Okay. Well, we have made attempts there to mitigate, but we will take all those comments and contributions and thank you both for them. With regard to condition 18, Mr. Payne, if you'd like to move on to your next point.
I think we've dealt with condition 19, which is about first aid. That's a statutory requirement, so not required. We've dealt with off sales of alcohol.
Sergeant Gosling, would you agree that with regard to stat rec, again, it sits in legislation for the requirement?
Yes, I'm happy with that, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on, Mr. Payne, if you'd like to go to your next point.
I think it really brings us, the only one that I can see that we haven't really addressed is the advertisement, which is condition 13. Excuse me just 1 second. Oh yes, and CCTV. The condition about advertisement, again, you would be happy for this to relate purely to alcohol promotions, and obviously you don't mean menus and that type of thing.
I don't believe it is condition 13. The condition 13
23.
is
23.
incident law. 23, you mean? Yeah.
Did I say 13? I meant 23.
You did indeed. 13. Yes, I think we've agreed. We discussed this, and we have on the table that it will no advertisement of any kind regarding alcohol. I think that we had covered that, and the members had taken that on board.
Yes, obviously, other than a menu, which is an advertisement of a form.
Gosling?
Right.
Like
Yes, I'm quite happy for menus to be covered under a to be not considered an advertisement, if you like.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any further questions, Mr. Kennedy?
The final matter was on CCTV. And
can you refer us there, please?
Yes, of course. CCTV is. I thought I had it here. One moment.
I know you keep losing things. It's 11, I think. Condition 11. Does that help? Yes, it's condition 11. Mr.
You are quite right. I'm very grateful. Very grateful. Sergeant, I wonder if you could explain in this particular premises, and bearing in mind the condition has got to be tailored to the premises, and this is what you're looking for. How many cameras would you be looking for at this particular premises on the beach deck?
Sergeant Gosling?
That's a very difficult question without looking at that in detail. I think it's about making sure that we get that evidential quality, certainly for those accessing that site through whichever primary area that they would access, whether it be where there's a welcome area for tables, and ensuring, of course, that there is some coverage there for people being served alcohol as well.
Okay.
Well,
I think you have your answer, Mr. Payne. I don't think Sergeant Gosling can give numbers. He's not a TV expert. He's just wishing that the adequate amount be provided to provide for that condition, I think, is what Sergeant Gosling's asking for.
Yes.
So I don't think I can answer your question.
No, I appreciate that, and I rather anticipated he might not be able to answer the question. And that brings with it a major difficulty, because, of course, it is a requirement that all conditions have got to be clear, precise and enforceable. And if the police aren't able to give us a number of CCTV cameras, it's rather difficult for an operator to work out what will be needed. If I could take you to the images that have been provided, which show the layout of the deck, you'll see that that's set out to tables and chairs and sofas. But there's at the moment, no barrier around it, so people could walk on and off that deck from any area. I'm anticipating that the police aren't looking for CCTV coverage around the entire perimeter of that area, are they?
Sergeant Gosling, if you'd like to answer that, thank you.
Again, without wishing to repeat, it's for the operator to get an appropriate survey done by a qualified CCTV engineer to best cover those accessing that site and being served alcohol. And I'm aware of those facilities being available. They are used in other premises throughout Bournemouth and beyond. So that facility is available from those CCTV providers.
Thank you, Sergeant Gosling. We take your point, and we also take Mr. Payne's point. There's a difficulty there, and it's something for the subcommittee to consider in their deliberations with regard to that particular condition.
So, Chair, I wonder if I could make this suggestion that condition 11 should actually refer to a CCTV system which is installed following consultation with a professional CCTV company.
Sergeant Gosling, would you be happy with that condition?
Yes, if it covers covers that site to a good evidential quality, yes.
Okay, CCTV operator to cover the site with good evidential quality with regard to access and egress. Right, we have that because later on we obviously need to, any conditions we're applying, as you so rightly say, they need to be clear and precise and enforceable, and we need to have the verbiage correct. Thank you, Jane. Any further questions?
Would you just excuse me for one moment while I just take some instructions?
Yes, of course. I'll give you a moment.
Chair, I'm grateful for that time. Thank you. Yes, if it were that the condition on condition 11 on CCTV refers to a CCTV system installed following professional advice from a CCTV company. That would be acceptable. And of course, a company will have regard to the standard of CCTV, the evidential quality, and those matters as well.
Thank you. So, Sergeant Gosling, are you still with us? Have we lost Sergeant Gosling?
No, I'm still with you.
There you are. So that condition has been agreed as stated with regard to that extra verbiage. So yeah, we seem to be content on that.
Thank you.
Mr. Payne, any further questions?
No, Chair, I think that we are the caveat. If I could just ask the police to confirm that this is a premises that the police have had no prior issue with, as far as they're concerned, that it's operated entirely satisfactorily throughout its life.
What was the caveat?
That was the question. The caveat was the question. I'm terribly sorry. Perhaps I didn't make that clear. No, if I could just clarify, that the police agree with me that this is a premises that has been very well run, that there have been no issues of any significance that have caused the police concern. I think that was what was said.
That is indeed a question. Sergeant Gosling, if you'd like to answer that, thank you.
Yes, and confirm the number of incidents associated to the premises as it stands is relatively low. Yes, yeah, no significant issues.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Payne, are you content with your questioning?
I am indeed very content. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. So I just asked now if our licensing officer has any questions for Sergeant Gosling with regard to her presentation.
No, I don't. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And just return to our members after we've heard all that negotiation, I suppose one would call it, with regard to trying to mitigate with trying to move these things forward. Are there any questions now? Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Chair. So I just problem unmuting there, lost my mouse. No further questions of.
I think it's the clarity now sits. Thank you. And Councillor Anderson, do you have any further questions now?
No further questions at this moment. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. So having heard that, we will copious notes have been made and hopefully we've got all that in order for our later deliberations. So you now all have an opportunity to sum up. And I will ask that Sergeant Gosling, as a responsible authority, sum up first. Thank you, Sergeant Gosling.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I'm very grateful for Mr. Payne for the opportunity to again further try and achieve some sort of agreement on some of those areas of concern. I think, again, without wishing to restate some of those areas, this is a very, very busy area, and we are anticipating unprecedented numbers of visitors this year. Having conditions that are appropriate to the premises, including good quality CCTV with coverage of those good evidential quality CCTV covering those people entering the site and leaving the site and being served alcohol is imperative. It's not that long ago, June 2020, when we experienced the major incident being declared in Bournemouth, given just purely the number of visitors attending, and we were overwhelmed. And I am delighted to say that the planning phase this year has been brilliant with our partners, and we anticipate being able to deliver an outstanding service to visitors and to residents of Dorset this year. And we would just ask that the committee do take on board the experiences of last year in considering ensuring that the conditions are robust and appropriate for a busy site such as Urban Reef. And that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Sergeant Gosling. And now your opportunity, Mr. Payne, and also Mr. Cribb, if you would like to sum up, you are more than welcome. I don't know who would like to go first. Mr. Cribb, Mr. Payne, who would like to sum up first?
Mr. Cribb, did you want to say anything in particular?
Yeah, just very briefly, thank you. And,
thank you, Mr. Cribb.
No, thank you. So just really to reiterate, we've been down there every day for 11 years. We work really closely with BCP. When that major incident was called last June, you know, we were operating, we were trading, I was down there on the beach, you know, we were managing it safely, we weren't having any challenges. You know, a number of police did come down, and it was predominantly, you know, at that time, toddlers playing in the ocean, you know, really nice community family vibe, and we'll continue to do our part to be a sort of a positive force for good. I know that it's a challenging year because so many other license applications have been made. I've actually worked with the council on looking, as an experienced operator, you know, they speak to us about how those other places should be traded, where they should trade. And I understand that when you don't know who is going to be coming in and operating those venues, maybe you need more onerous conditions. But, you know, we're experienced, we've got a proven track record, and I would just say, look, your support and continued partnership would be hugely appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cribb. And Mr. Payne.
Chair, I'm grateful. Yes, partnership has been very much the watchword of this particular premises and the way that this application has progressed. As you've heard from me earlier, we consulted with the police even before the application went in to get some views from them. And the proof of the pudding perhaps is in the eating. Mr. Cribb has mentioned last year, Sergeant Gosling has mentioned last year, the premises for trading, and yet we still have the police quite rightly saying that this is a premises that doesn't have any significant problems. Quite clearly last year did not present a major problem, and as Mr. Cribb has put it in his words, you know, he doesn't deal with scallywags. This is a premises that deals in selling food and drink in a responsible way to a select clientele. It's not a premises that is intending to or does deal with scallywags. And in that vein, that of course is relevant to the licensing objective of preventing crime and disorder. Preventing crime and disorder goes hand in hand with this particular premises and the way that it operates. And that is why we have engaged in the consultation and the negotiation that we've been happy to do so. It would be all too easy for me to sit here as a lawyer and just throw out half of the conditions that the police have offered because there is case law that says that it can't be imposed or it shouldn't be imposed. But that's not what we've done. We've demonstrated that actually we want to operate this premises responsibly. We've applied for a license where we don't actually need one for the main deck area because, as I've said and has been agreed, alcohol can be consumed on that area, food can be sold and served on that area, and the only difference that we have in this application effectively to what happens at the moment is that customers will be able to order their food and drink at the point or close to the point where they consume it. That has major impacts in terms of promoting public safety, because there is no transit, or there will be less need for transit from the main premises to the deck area. Customers will not need to come and go from the deck area to the main premises, and it will promote the prevention of crime and disorder, because we wouldn't want to promote crime and disorder. We'll prevent crime and disorder by having this seated area, and it's important to note that there is a seated area provided, and people being contained in that area. Now, Sergeant Gosling very helpfully mentioned the appearance of the restaurant, and quite clearly that is really important in terms of some of these conditions that have been suggested, the justification for them, in case somebody should come and buy a drink and take it onto the beach. Well, the appearance from this, in Sergeant Gosling's words, is as a restaurant, and to quote him, is less likely to attract problems. With that in mind, one has to look through the conditions that have been negotiated, discussed, and those that perhaps are not quite there, and decide whether it is proportionate and reasonable, given that admission, that these conditions should be imposed and provide additional burden on the premises. But I think Mr. Cribb's point at the end of his initial summary was quite right. This is about people. This is not about a piece of paper. The piece of paper for this premises is the starting point. The license is the starting point. It sets out the basic conditions upon which you as a local authority expect the premises to operate. But the premises doesn't stop there. It goes further. As Mr. Cribb has explained, he's gone to the extent of shutting the premises if there has been a sign of problems in the past. That's what's been done. That's not a licence condition, that's not been offered, but that is nevertheless what has been done. So this is a responsible premises and should be awarded a licence with appropriate conditions that are proportional to what is suggested. So with that, councillors, I hope that has been helpful. I hope you've appreciated what is anticipated with this particular premises, and I do ask that the licence is granted with the amendments that we have agreed to.
Thank you very much, Mr. Payne. I will now conclude the hearing, but before I do, thank you very much, Mr. Cribb, and for all your contributions, and also to Mr. Payne. So we will now conclude the hearing, and the subcommittee will deliberate in private with the legal advisor and clerk, and the present notification of the subcommittee decision will be provided within the period of 5 working days, as I said before, which is today. And the notification decision will include the information about the right of appeal as appropriate. So I'll ask our legal advisor, please, Ms. Coulter, if she would just take us through that right of appeal. Thank you, Ms. Coulter.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm that the party, the applicant and the responsible authority who have made a representation, the police, are able to appeal against the decision of the committee, whether that's the opposing of any condition or the substantive decision, within 21 days to the Magistrates' Court from the date of receipt of the formal written decision. And that information will be contained within the letter that's sent out. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. We will in fact be going on now to our next item, which is item 8. But I would ask, please, members, if you would grant me a short 10-minute break. And I would ask that we conclude and then come back at 12 o'clock, if that is in order. I hope that's acceptable. And I would ask if that's okay with you, Matt. regarding the Noisy Lobster, Avon, Christchurch. So this application has been received for a variation of the premises licence for the premises known as Noisy Lobster, Avon Beach, Mudford, Christchurch. This matter is brought before the Licensing Subcommittee for determination, and I'll ask each participant to introduce themselves and state their role. And I'd ask the members, please, if they would state their wards. My name is Councillor Jude Button. I'm Chairman of the Licensing Committee and also Chairman of this subcommittee. And my ward is Creekmore, Hilborn and Waterloo. Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Councillor Sarah Anderson. I'm a member of the Subcommittee for Licensing and I represent Moordown Ward.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Richard Burton. I'm a member of the subcommittee for today and I represent Bearwood and Merley Ward.
Thank you very much. And that's your subcommittee members, ladies and gentlemen. Moving on to our officers, Sarah Rogers.
Sarah Rogers isn't presenting it, Chair. Trudy
Oh,
Barlow
sorry, I beg your pardon. Trudy Barlow. Thank you, Trudy.
Yes, I'm Trudy Barlow, Licensing Officer, and I'm presenting the case this morning.
Thank you so much. A swap there I didn't note. Thank you. Tanya Coulter. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Tanya Coulter, Senior Solicitor at BCP Council, advising the committee today.
Thank you, Ms Coulter. Michelle Cutler.
Good afternoon, Michelle Cutler. I'm the Licensing Clerk for today, BCP Council.
Thank you. And in addition, we do have Democratic Services officers who are providing technical support to the meeting in the background, but they don't take part of the hearing, but they're integral to the hearing working, of course. So now we ask Peter Hayward. Thank you. Mr. Hayward, if you'd like to introduce yourself. Mr. Hayward has frozen somewhat. I don't know if he's still with us. Well, we'll come back to Mr. Hayward. So we'll go on now to those making representations, and we have Mrs. Rimmer.
Yes, I'm Jo Rimmer. I'm a user of Avon Beach and a resident of the Stampit area.
Thank you, Mrs. Rimmer. And Mr. Lake, Mr. Chris Lake.
Hi, yeah, my name's Chris Lake. I'm also a resident of the Friars Cliff area as well, and passionate about our lovely area. Okay,
and members, for the purposes of Mr. Lake's attendance today, he made a late submission, a late application to speak, and I was happy to hear him, so that's why he's here today. Mr. Hayward, you're back with us. Could you just introduce yourself, please?
My name's Peter Hayward. I'm the one of the directors of Avon Beach Limited and the applicant for the licence you see before you.
Thank you, Mr. Hayward. Okay, so before I run through the procedure, I'd just like to check that everybody has given notice their intention to speak has been identified, and that anybody who wants to withdraw a representation or wishes not to speak, speaks now. Put your hand up on the raised hand icon. Okay, I'm not seeing anything, so I will take that as accepted. I'm going to now explain the procedure that for order of speaking. The licensing officer will present a report, and that's Trudy Barlow. And then the applicant will make their application, that's Mr. Hayward. And questions of the... I have totally forgotten. Councillor Hillard, are you there? Is Councillor Hilliard there?
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Hilliard, I am so sorry. I've got your name in red. And I've just realised that I've totally overlooked you. I do apologise.
No problem.
Councillor Hilliard, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please. Thank you.
Yeah, Paul Hilliard, Ward Councillor for Muddyford, Stampit and West Highcliffe, obviously wherever this restaurant sits. So I'm representing, but I'm also reading a residence statement.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much, Councillor Hilliard. And again, my profuse apologies. There'll be questions of the applicant, Mr. Hayward, by all parties. That'll be the members and all other parties. And then the other persons will make their representations. And these other persons in this instance are Councillor Hilliard, Mrs. Rimmer and Mr. Lake. And then there will be questions asked of the other persons, and they'll be asked by the members and the applicant and the officer. And at the end, all parties will be given an opportunity to sum up with the party who spoke last to go first. So the hearing will then conclude and we will deliberate in private with the legal advisor and clerk. And the notification of the subcommittee's decision is to be given within 5 working days, beginning with the day of the last day on which the hearing was held, that is today, in accordance with the regulations because of COVID. And the notification decision will include information about the right of appeal, and our legal advisor will give that information at the appropriate time. So I now like to ask all parties that they confirm agreement on the proposed procedure. If you're not happy, please say so. So Sarah Rogers. I'm sorry, Trudy Barlow.
Trudy,
really
yes, I'm happy.
I'm forgetting you this morning, Trudy. My apologies again. Tanya Coulter.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Peter Hayward.
Yes, fine.
And Joanne Rimmer.
Yes, fine.
Chris Lake.
Yes, also
and
fine.
Councillor Hilliard.
Yes, fine. Thank you.
Consent. Thank you. So just to finally remind all parties speaking not to repeat the information which they've already given in writing, but to expand on their written representations. And all questions will be asked through the chair, and there will be no cross-examination of parties. So I'll now ask our licensing officer, Trudy Barlow, to present her report. Thank you, Ms. Barlow.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, all. The application before you is for a premises known as a Noisy Lobster to consider whether to grant a variation to the premises licence for a takeaway food hatch to have off sales of alcohol from Monday to Sunday, 1100 to 2100 hours. The current premises licence already has permission for off sales from the restaurant cafe area of the premises as shown on the current licence plan from 0900 to midnight. These off sales are subject conditions already on the licence at point 14 and point 22. Further conditions to this application were agreed by Dorset Police as shown in Appendix 4. 44 other persons made representations to the application based on all 4 of the licensing objectives, namely prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, prevention of public nuisance, and the protection of children from harm. Should the application be granted and the applicants fail to operate in accordance with their licence and any conditions attached to it, they will be aware that any of the responsible authorities or other persons may request a review of the licence at any time. Members should also be aware that while some points raised in the representation are valid, they are not matters for consideration by the licensing committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Barlow. So are there any questions on points of fact with regard to Mrs. Barlow's report? Firstly, members, any questions on points of fact? Councillor Anderson?
No questions at this time, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Burton?
And thank you, Chair. No questions for me at this time.
Thank you. So now it's open to other parties. Are there any questions from any other parties on points of fact re the report? There are none. I'm seeing no indication. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thank you for your report, Ms. Barlow. So now moving on to the applicant, Mr. Hayward, if you'd like to put forward your submission. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Peter Hayward. I'm a director of Avon Beach Limited. The major variations licence you see before you today is for our takeaway fish and chip shop, now called the Lobster Hatch. This application is for alcohol to be served with the consumption of food. Alcohol will be dispensed from plastic containers or cans, no glass. And as with the restaurant, a Challenge 25 policy will be in place and all licensing objectives adhered to. As the licensing officer said, the current license of the lease permits alcohol to be sold from the takeaway with food in the restaurant. This was carried out by the previous tenants for many years, and the purpose of this application is to provide an improved service for customers and a more efficient serving system from the Lobster Hatch to reduce queues and congestion in the restaurant. Over the past 4 years, as a business, we have sold alcohol to take away with the consumption of food using temporary events notices and the permission of Bournemouth BCP Council and previously Christchurch Council as landlord. The temporary events notices were assigned to the busiest days of the year over the past 4 years during heat waves and bank holidays. We have not received any complaints or concerns from the police, licensing, environmental health, or BCP Council, both in their capacity as local authority and landlord. There have not been any mentions of issues with litter, antisocial behaviour or crowding over these past 4 years. This includes last year, where across the South Coast, record numbers of people frequented the beach after the lockdown. The many other establishments across, as you'll be aware, across the Bournemouth area operate a takeaway facility and do not have the restriction of food as we do. We are not looking for the food restriction to be lifted. We're happy with it as it will encourage a more civilized drinking and eating environment, and we don't want the pub atmosphere that may have been suggested in the objectors. To refuse our application, we believe would be a prejudice against us and a reactive to the scaremongering that has been ongoing from local residents since our inception. Every improvement we have made at Avon Beach has come against objections from local residents and doomsday predictions of what might transpire. Instead, our applications have resulted in a hugely desirable and popular location that has much improved facilities and generates millions of pounds yearly to the local economy. BCP and their many different departments have not registered any formal concerns with regards to our operations at Avon Beach. I'd like to quickly address some of the concerns that were raised by the objectors. Firstly, being the drunken and antisocial behaviour. The sale of alcohol must be with food. This is not a pub, as many objectors have described. There's a challenge 25 policy in place, and in line with licensing rules, no drunk customer will be served alcohol. Alcohol served from our takeaway hatch will be done by a trained member of staff and has much more control than members of the public bringing copious amounts of alcohol, many in glass bottles, from supermarkets. To reiterate, we have served alcohol from the lobster hatch for the past 4 years and not had any antisocial linked behaviour to our operation. Litter and glass. No drinks will be served in glass, to repeat. And as mentioned, this takeaway has been used for the past 4 years and we've not had any problems with litter. In the peak seasons, we employ full-time litter collectors and bin emptiers from 8 AM till 9 PM. I see that some of the objectors submitted some photographs with their objections. To address some of them, I've noticed that some of the photos are over 3 years old. I can tell from the type of bins that are pictured. Most of the litter is not that generated by the takeaway or shop. It's from other local takeaway establishments, fast food restaurants and whatnot. And there are photos of the car park. And this is not the responsibility of us as a tenant to maintain. This is the responsibility of Bournemouth Council. Since these photos were taken, we ensure our litter pickers are on site into the evening and the bins are emptied and put away after the takeaway outlets are closed and cleaned. Another issue that was raised were large queues. Again, we have run this for 4 years and not had any mention of an issue from the council with regards to the queues. As alcohol will be only dispensed with food, there will only be one queue for the takeaway hatch. This queue is managed by a full-time member of staff to ensure that it does not encroach on members of the public. Again, these queues are present at the moment, socially distanced and so even longer, and yet we still have had no problems reported to us by BCP. All-day drinking. This is not the case. The need for food, to have food with the alcohol, alleviates the risk of binge drinking, and the drinks on offer are not cheap pints and shots. They are quality wines and beers that complement the food. Contravention to the lease. The BCP will confirm that this is not in contravention to the lease, and I suggest the objectors do some more research. Mess in the public toilets. Even though our lease stipulates that the toilets close at 7 o'clock, we close them at 9 PM as the beaches are still busy into the evening, and the toilets are inspected regularly throughout. In summary, this application is to provide an improved service to our customers. Our lease currently and license currently permits us to sell alcohol with food for takeaway from the restaurant. We wish to improve the service and so sell it from a takeaway hatch to reduce congestion and improve the efficiency of waiting times and queues. The concerns from objectors feature the words could and would. Our past 4 years of trading in the busiest periods the South Coast have ever experienced show that these fears will not happen. The police, licensing, environmental health and BCP Council have not registered any concerns in the past 4 years of us carrying out takeaway drinks, alcoholic drinks, or with the application that you see before you. We are a business that employs over 90 people and have heavily invested into improving the facilities and offerings for locals and visitors to enjoy. We are responsible, active operators who ensure that all licensing objectives are adhered to throughout all of our operations over the past 10 years of our ownership. I urge the committee to look at the history of the past 10 years of our stewardship at Avon Beach and the lack of incidents relating to the sale of alcohol. I also urge the committee to consider what other sites on BCP beaches are permitted to do. And finally, I urge the committee to consider our professional and proactive management of Avon Beach and the thousands of visitors from both near and far that appreciate our endeavours. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hayward. So indeed, questions now for the applicant. So firstly, open to members. Councillor Burton, do you have any questions at this moment?
Thank you, Chair. None at the moment. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. And Councillor Anderson, do you have any questions for the applicant at this moment?
Thank you, Chair. I have no questions at this time.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hayward, I have a few questions. I mean, obviously, there is some strong opposition to this application with 44 written objections, and we have 2 representatives here together with the ward councillor who will be making their submissions later. You, in your letter representation from the applicant, which you sent in to us, which is your red submission, you have indeed covered, I believe, I'd just like some confirmation of some of the issues that arise out of these objections. Just to confirm that point 14 of your mandatory conditions, Annex 1, which is all off sale should be made either in cans or plastic bottles, you have agreed that?
Yes, yeah,
Well,
we have that since.
Thank you very much.
The last 4 years.
Thank you. The other item being number 22, that alcohol is only consumed by those consuming food and there'll be no separate alcohol sales.
That's correct, as has been the case for the past 4 years.
Read that as well. The other question I have is adequate provisions to be made for safe disposal of bottles, cans and supplies in off sales. I was wondering what provision you had there. You have put in your letter that from 8 AM to 9 PM you employ bin emptiers. Are these the same bins, and is that what they're employed for? Could I have confirmation of that, please?
Yeah, that's correct. They're employed in the peak season to empty our bins surrounding the takeaway outlets and on the beach.
That's extremely helpful, thank you. Just another point of confirmation, really. In your application, you say the website clearly quotes that you are in fact now trading as the Lobster Hatch, but in your application you name yourself as All Thing Fish has been in operation for over 6 years. So could we just have confirmation that you are in fact trading as the Lobster Hatch and not All Things Fish anymore?
Yes, correct. It was just a rebrand of the same outlet.
Okay, it's just that the application was a little bit confusing.
Sure.
One question to raise on behalf of the objectors, although I'm sure they'll raise their own, is the use of temporary event notices throughout the year, which indeed your business took advantage of. And it says All Things Fish has sold alcohol on the weekends and summer holidays for the past 5 years, and it's been a great success without harming any licensing objectives. And I was just wondering if you could confirm if there had been any complaints regarding the above, because I'm sure the objectors will be raising those as a point of fact.
We have had no complaints from any of the authorities relevant to alcohol sales, so none from police, environmental health, BCP as landlord or as local authority.
So from no responsible authorities, thank you. And the other last point, I hope it's the last point for you, is this major variation of the licence, this is stated on your application, is to add the takeaway outlet as an extra point of sale in the premises licence. This is translated in some of the objections submissions, a concern that this is to, the application is solely to increase the sale of alcohol from the premises. Do you have a comment with regard to that, please, Mr. Hayward?
Yes, well, at both the previous tenants and ourselves, we currently could, and the previous tenants did, allow customers to come into the restaurant to have alcohol to take away with food. Because our restaurant are fortunate to be very busy, we wouldn't want the extra traffic of people coming in just for that intention. And also there's the issue in the summer of people not wearing shirts and coming in their bare feet and things like that. So to alleviate the congestion in the restaurant, we are merely providing the same service from another point, which will help with queues and more efficiently serve the people more quickly and avoid any congestion in the restaurant.
Thank you very much. And just the last was your plan. If we could have reference to your plan, the site plans. I'll just find them myself. It was where, in fact, on the site plan is the outlet for the sale of alcohol. It was quite difficult for me to decide this. So
as you look from the seed at our site, the left-hand side is the Noisy Lobster restaurant.
Yes.
Then there are the public toilets, and workshop, and it's adjacent to that is the takeaway outlet, which is in the same building as the Avon Beach shop.
So
It's
is
a
that the
window.
roadside or is that the roadside or the beach side?
The beach side.
The beach side. I have
Onto
you.
the promenade.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Hayward. That's all I have for you at the moment. But now's an opportunity now for other parties to ask questions. So I will go first to Councillor Hilliard. Do you have any questions for the applicant? Thank you, Councillor Hilliard.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, obviously, Mr. Hayward, I've personally had people in the last 4 years complain about antisocial behaviour, the littering and disturbance. Now, whether that is specifically related to alcohol is debatable, but can you confirm that you have had complaints about people around the area?
So your question then, Councillor Hilliard, if you could be specific in your questions rather than a preamble, is has Mr. Hayward received complaints from residents and from people using the facility? Yes.
And police and BCP, yeah.
I think we did clarify that there haven't been any complaints with regard to the responsible authorities, which would be police, environment, etc. But you're asking with regard to whether residents have made complaints, people living.
Well, I'm also saying, because obviously what we're saying is, did they specifically relate to alcohol? Now, it's debatable how you can pinpoint that it relates to alcohol.
Exactly. So we'll put the question to Mr. Hayward and see how he manages with it. Mr. Hayward.
As Mr. Hilliard's admitted, how can anything be attributed to the sale of alcohol? People are free to bring their own alcohol and their own food and their own litter to the beach. What I will say is that we have had no formal complaints from the relevant authorities. I'm not even aware of any complaints that have been directed us from residents. But 4 years is a long time and I couldn't be 100% sure of that. And I would also say that we are commended by BCP for our management of Avon Beach, and I've continued to do so, even with all these investments and further expansions. So I don't see how that quite could be attributed to alcohol sales, anything negative that happens on the beach. I'm sure Bournemouth, Southbourne, Boscombe, I think that we have considerable less problems on our beaches.
Thank you, Mr. Hayward. Thank you. Yes, we take your point. Thank you. And to say, as you quite rightly say, Mr. Hilliard, it's a difficult one to pin down, Councillor Hilliard. Did you have another question, Councillor Hilliard?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
OK, thank you very much for that. So now, do any of our other parties have questions? Mrs. Rimmer, do you have a question for the applicant?
Well, there's a question that comes up in what I was going to say in my social.
Well, we'll address that then for you. OK, thank you, Mrs. Rimmer. So, Mr. Lake, do you have any questions for the applicant?
Yeah, just one. Mr. Hayward's made a case towards that it's been alcohol has been sold in the last 4 to 5 years. I must admit, I cannot remember any occasions having seen alcohol being served in the last 4 to 5 years. Could he confirm how many days have been selling alcohol in the last 4 to 5 years?
OK, this might be with regard to the temporary event notices, Mr. Hayward. Thank you for your question, Mr. Barlow.
Yes, it's been, again, 4 years ago, I can't remember what the maximum amount of days that we were allowed. If it's the same as what is at the moment, then 21 days for the past 4 years on the busiest weekends in the summer. Last year, we actually sold it every day because we interpreted the COVID regulations to allow us to do so. And again, hadn't had any issues. And we've also done them this year. We've employed it for the past 20 days in the month of April and May.
I have a second question.
Yes, OK, thank you, Mr. Lake. Your second question.
Has alcohol been advertised for sale in the past 4 to 5 years, as it is currently today since April?
Thank you, Mr. Hayward.
Yes, it was on advertised. It was on our menu board adjacent to the hatch for sale throughout the past 4 or 5 years. Otherwise, we wouldn't have sold much. So yeah, we did advertise it.
OK, thank you, Mr. Hayward. No further questions from other persons. Just ask then if our licensing officer has any questions. Mrs. Barlow?
I have no questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we will move on, and we will ask the other persons. It's your opportunity now to put forward your representations, and I'll start with the ward councillor, if that's acceptable to all objectors who are present. Councillor Hilliard, if you'd like to put forward your representation, and you are very welcome to read out the representation which has been given to you by one of your residents, Mr. Pollard. So we're quite happy to accept too. Thank you, Mr. Hilliard. Councillor Hilliard.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll start with my first, and I'll start by sharing the coroner's clear warning on the dangers of swimming while intoxicated, following an inquest last week into the death of a man who drowned off the Dorset coast last summer. Swimming whilst intoxicated significantly increases the risk of coming to harm. The premises in question are owned by BCP Council, therefore we need to lead by example. The current lease and licence is clear. Alcohol sales only permitted within the enclosed premises alongside food orders. Temporary event notices for off-site sales may have been used on peak days to assist in COVID-19, etc., but a permanent licence is not appropriate and the beach is too narrow to have an enclosed drinking area. On behalf of the residents, I object to this application as it will clearly impact adversely on the licensing objectives in all 4 areas. Prevention of crime and disorder. The consumption of alcohol off-site would be relatively unregulated, leading to antisocial behaviour and underage drinking. Crowds of people gathering on the promenade and beach will bring disorder and oppose COVID-19 distancing restrictions. It is not clear where CCTV cameras will be installed. They will not be able to cover the whole beach. Prevention of public nuisance. Off sales will encourage all-day drinking, leading to increased public nuisance to other beach users. The premises are located in a residential area, which is likely to be disturbed by noise and activity in the late evening when the sale of alcohol ceases at 9 p.m. The toilet facilities on the beach are not sufficient for a huge number of drinkers on the beach, leading to unsanitary behaviour. Public safety. There will be a higher risk from discarded broken plastic and cans in an area where many young people play and beach users go barefooted in the sand. People drinking alcohol will be more likely to enter the cold water as their inhibitions are lowered as more alcohol is consumed, which will increase the risk of drownings. Protection of children from harm. There will be an increased risk of harm to children playing in the sand with discarded drinks containers. High risk that underage drinking will occur as this is not a regulated area. Mixing alcohol sales on a beach where teenagers hang out is a recipe for danger, especially close to the water. Earlier this morning, this committee heard the application from Urban Reef, which was for alcohol sales within a controlled deck area with tight security and control measures. This committee has also recently approved licenses at a number of pop-up bars along Bournemouth beaches. It is a pity the police are not present to share their concerns, as they did for the application earlier this morning, which is very similar to this, and clearly their reservations reflect that this location is not extensively patrolled. The committee has heard about East Cliff Promenade, Toffs Beach, etc. These applications were originally made for the provision of sale of alcohol, both on and off the premises, but following consultation with Dorset Police, it was agreed that the licence would remove the provision of off-sale sales of and relate only with food. within an enclosed area that are strictly managed and monitored. Also, with close radio contact with police, security, and the membership of the town watch schemes in the respective areas, along with CCTV. Enclosed areas allow strict entry and exit checks to ensure that food and drink is not taken off site to an open beach. Surely the same principles should apply with this application, that alcohol should only be sold within a controlled area. The beach, unfortunately, is too narrow to allow an area within the beach, so stay within the existing restaurant makes sense. This application appears to be submitted solely for a commercial benefit without any consideration or benefit for the majority of people who live in the area, or for the many visitors who like to come to Christchurch beaches because they offer a tranquil and child-friendly destination. This is a beautiful area, not commercialised, and essentially a small family beach. Personally, I have not been contacted by anyone in favour of this application, only objectors. Is there demand for quality wine and beer being served out of cans and plastic bottles whilst protecting your food from seagulls? Please reject this application. And if I can go straight on to the objector, Mr. Robert Pollard.
Yes, please do.
He gave apologies. He had made a medical appointment.
That's fine. Yes.
As a regular user of Noisy Lobster and its facilities, I appreciate some of the benefits that it has brought to Avon Beach. However, this doesn't give the owners the right to ride roughshod over the local residents and denigrate the location for their own personal financial gain. Avon Beach is described in BCP's Seafront Strategy document as the family-focused bathing beach. The emphasis should be on family-based enjoyment. Its history and nature and character within the Muddyford Quay conservation area are significantly different to that of the highly commercialised areas around Bournemouth and Poole. And as such, it attracts families, particularly those with young children, from residents and visitors alike. The current application for a licence to serve alcohol from 11 AM to 9 PM effectively proposes to turn the beach area into an all-drinking venue, which will inevitably alienate the families that prefer to use this area and change the character of the beach across the day and into the evening. The main restaurant premises have a long time been subject to a condition in their lease with BCP, the landlords, that only permits the sale and consumption of alcohol on the premises when served with food. I wish to object most strongly to this application for the following reasons. Number one, Avon Beach is used predominantly by families with small children, and to be surrounded by adults consuming alcohol in uncontrolled amounts would be wholly inappropriate. Number two, there is a health and safety risk from broken plastic and cans in an area where many young children run around barefooted. Number three, the sale of alcohol would inevitably lead to unacceptable levels of litter and detritus on the beach and surrounding area. Number four, the open bar facility would be a magnet for jet ski users and other leisure craft to beach their craft in an area where young children are swimming. The consumption of alcohol amongst this group could lead to behaviour that can endanger the health and lives of themselves and others. Number five, whilst controls are proposed regarding the control of age purchasing alcohol, there is unlikely to be sufficient supervision as to who is actually consuming the alcohol, particularly in respect of underage drinking. Number six, the actual consumption of alcohol would be unregulated, which has a high propensity to lead to antisocial behaviour. Number seven, the premises are located immediately adjacent to a residential area, which is likely to be disturbed by noise and activity in the late evenings when the sale of alcohol ceases. This is different to other beaches locations where there is more distance between residential and the beach. Number 8, the premises are not served by adequate public transport, meaning that those living in the area are likely leaving the area are likely to be driving and possibly doing so under the influence of too much alcohol. Number 9, previous experience of temporary licenses for off sales has led to antisocial behaviour and behaviour dangerous to public health and safety, particularly related to toilets. These close at 9 p.m, but bladders, etc. don't. Number 10, the area does not have a regular police presence, unlike central Bournemouth and Poole. 11, it is noted that Dorset Police have stipulated a condition that CCTV should be installed to help manage the age of those purchasing the alcohol. However, this does not prevent underage drinking. They just get someone else of the appropriate age to buy their drinks for them. 12, CCTV is helpful in identifying perpetrators of crime and antisocial behaviour, but doesn't actually stop it. This is a holiday area with visitors from far and wide, and it will be impossible to identify and apprehend perpetrators when, by the time any offence is investigated, the persons could be back in their own homes across the country. 13, it is also proposed by the police that a condition of a licence is that the alcohol is only sold with food. What is to stop a person ordering a bag of chips and 6 pints of beer? 14, there are several pubs within easy walking distance that provide alcoholic beverages in a much more controlled and appropriate environment. 15, how does the intention to serve drinks and wine in single-use plastic containers correspond with BCP's ethical, environmental and recycling policies, particularly as the applicant does not segregate waste, that as the applicant does not provide the opportunity to segregate waste at the point of disposal. 16, if the unfortunate circumstances that a licence was to be granted and in effect creating a pub without walls, I assume the applicant will have to comply with whatever COVID restrictions will in place regarding pubs, e.g. currently groups of 6, table ordering and table service for as long as appropriate. It should also be noted that the directors of Noisy Lobster have an extensive history of ignoring clauses in their lease, of failing to follow proper procedures for planning applications and flouting existing regulations. Indeed, whilst this application process has been ongoing, the business has openly advertised the sale of alcohol beverages from the hatch and indeed actually started serving customers in mid-April, resulting in half-empty beer, plastic glasses being left in the adjacent area until the authorities intervened and stopped this activity. I implore the committee to take the view that this is wrong activity in the wrong area by the wrong operators and decline this application. Thank you, Chair. That's from Mr. Pollard. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hilliard. There was an awful lot in there, and just to point of clarification, just for information, that you raised other premises and you put them forward as examples. Well, I just do need to explain that this subcommittee considers each application on its merits and considers the evidence we have before us today with regard to this specific application. We don't look further afield. We just look at the relevance of what we have in front of us. And we can also not consider the fiscal profit or loss of any premise. That is not a matter for us as to whether this may increase their profit or reduce it. And the last point, the matter of the lease, that's a civil matter and it's not a matter for this licensing subcommittee. So just to remind other speakers, if they're thinking of covering any of those 3 items, if they could just remove them from their submissions because they are not relevant. Thank you very much for your submission, Councillor Hilliard, and for that of Mr. Pollard. Extremely grateful. We'll now move on to Mrs. Rimmer. If you would like to put forward your submission, Mrs. Rimmer, thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to start off saying I have absolutely no issues with the Noisy Lobster. Times restaurant, and kiosks of hot food and ice cream to the beach.
Okay, Mrs. Rimmer,
however, I do feel that introducing what would effectively be an all-day bar and an everyday.
Mrs. Rimmer.
Appreciate that there is a clause that says alcohol shall only be consumed by those persons consuming food.
I'm sorry,
does that mean someone couldn't order 10 beers and a bottle of wine with a single bag of chips?
Thank you. Could we contact how do I speak to Mrs. Rimmer? How do I stop Mrs. Rimmer from talking, bless her heart, because I can't hear what she's saying. I want to be able to hear what she's saying, but I can't stop her. I'll just stop talking. Could you unmute the mic, please, so I can speak? Could you unmute? Mrs. Rimmer, I'm so sorry.
Was it complete? Sorry.
No. It was. Mrs. Rimmer, if you just let me speak. If you just let me speak, thank you. We couldn't hear you. It was rather intermittent and broken up. So if you'd like to start again, okay, and just speak slowly and clearly, okay? Thank you very much. When you're ready.
Okay, thank you. I have no issues with the Noisy Lobster. I've enjoyed some really good times in the restaurant, and I recognise that the kiosks offer benefits to visitors and locals, because it's very, very difficult to take hot food and ice cream to the beach with you. However, I feel that introducing what would effectively be an all-day bar every day does more potential problems than benefits for the local area. I appreciate that there is a clause that says alcohol shall only be consumed by those persons consuming food. But does that mean that someone couldn't order 10 beers and a bottle of wine with a single bag of chips? What if they're consuming their own food? That wording is very ambiguous and rather surprising. If large drinks orders were placed, I feel it would be hard for an ambitious business such as to decline. Avon Beach is all beach for families and people wanting to enjoy its natural beauty. Why introduce the potential for antisocial issues linked to alcohol consumption? If people want to drink, it's always been easy for them to bring their own. That's all I need to say.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Rimmer, and we heard you loud and clear. Thank you very much indeed.
Apologies.
No, not your fault. Technology is very, very difficult. Thank you. Mr. Lake, if you'd like to put forward your submission now. Thank you, Mr. Lake.
Yep, thank you very much indeed. Please do let me know if you can't hear me at all.
We can hear you loud and clear, Mr. Lake. That's fine. Thank you.
Perfect. So my objections would be based around a couple of points that are already been made, but to strengthen those. One, it is very much a different area. It's very much a residential area, Christchurch Beach, very different to those beaches of other areas that you will see quoted, whether that be in Boscombe or Bournemouth or Southbourne. Houses are distance-wise less than 100 metres away. And the second point was to emphasise the family nature. There is definitely a very clear different family nature to Christchurch Beach here, Avon Beach we're talking about, which is mainly focused on families and particularly young children, but not forgetting the very high percentage of elderly people who live in the Highcliffe and Muddyford and Avon Beach areas. In fact, it's the highest in the entire country, ahead of population. And therefore, the nature of the beach is very different. An alcohol sale on a beach location is not in keeping with this area. The second point would really be around the rubbish and the plastics. Sorry, really about the plastics and the cans that were mentioned. Great that glass will not be used, but plastic can be cut young children and adults' feet just as easily. And we have already seen in previous years and also currently this year in April and in the beginning of May now, plastic cups being left on the sand. It has been seen. And that will lead to further accidents, particularly for the high percentage of young children that we have in the area. The next point would be around the antisocial behaviour. We have already seen this in previous years, and it was obviously communicated by Mr. Hayward that that the alcohol has been served here, and antisocial behaviour has been seen. And the off sale of alcohol on the beach area will just exacerbate this problem to the extent where, yes, it is quite possible at the moment to buy 10 beers or wine and get away with a minimum amount of food. We have asked the staff, and they have actively said you don't need to buy a lot of food, just a packet of chips will do. Now, this will lead to antisocial behaviour, particularly in this physical area where the kiosk, and this is literally a takeaway kiosk in a wall, can be used by one person to buy some alcohol and then literally walk probably less than 10 meters away, and they are hidden by a hut and out of sight. So this will lead to, it can lead to underage drinking as well, and the antisocial behaviour. And there is nothing to stop that, and it is out of sight, unfortunately, because it's on a public beach as well. The next point would really be around alcohol and sea swimming. I see that the point was already raised by Councillor Hilliard, but this is definitely, I've spoken to the RNLI who have a beach hut there in the very peak season, and they agree that mixing alcohol with swimming in the sea is extremely dangerous because it lowers one's inhibitions, and cold also lowers your blood temperature, and therefore you're more susceptible to getting cold and getting into risk when in the water. This will be coupled with, it was also mentioned, somebody mentioned jet skis. We do already have a very popular area for jet skis and water users there, and they do come ashore already in the previous couple of years, driving too fast within the swim zones, which is regulated, disregarding those rules, and they go to the Noisy Lobster for their food naturally, which is great. They go for coffees, which is great. But as soon as alcohol will be served, they are the types, as described, I think, in the previous meeting as undesirables, or even the word scallywags that were used. So I'll stick to undesirables. That will be exacerbated, definitely, and we have seen that already in previous years, and no doubt will be this year as well. The beach, Southbourne and Bournemouth beaches are patrolled by the RNLI in majority of the year, whereas the Avon Beach is actually only patrolled in the 2 months of the year. So there's a big difference there between the different beaches. The next point would be is that the fish and chip kiosk is actually a very small hole in the wall and is not actually a bar or a restaurant in any way. It is literally a takeaway slot in the wall, and therefore it's very difficult to stop people. It's encouraging people to drink alcohol that are wearing no shirts and just their swimming trunks and are coming to the beach, and that can lead to antisocial behavior that I mentioned earlier, but also encouraging people to drink in hot climates and then going in the sea. So the mixture of those three things together is the point that I wanted to make there. Rubbish on the beach would be my next point. I know it was stated, but there's been no official complaints, but actually this does very much surprise me because it's very easy to see in the past years, of which there is the photographic evidence, yes, perhaps not of this last few months, but of previous years. So the statement that we don't have problems in the previous years is not correct. There are problems. Rubbish is seen, and it's currently seen, and even the residents themselves actually have to go and do a lot of the clearing up themselves. I see people walking to the beach with plastic bags to clear up rubbish like I do. The statement that the rubbish is not from the Noisy Lobster is actually not correct, because you can see clearly that it is all things fish packaging on the logo on much of the rubbish. So this is already a problem and will be exacerbated with the sale of alcohol. Additional point would be the sale is really is where it is sold. So in Mr. Hayward's letter that he read out, that it was to alleviate overcrowding inside the restaurant. Well, we have already seen, since they are rebranding from All Things Fish to The Hatch, that there are queues forming outside of this kiosk, and this is and has already, even though we're far away from a peak season, been blocking the promenade, which is a public right of way, compromising any social distancing rules that have been in place. They've had to address this by getting people to staff to try and keep the people to one side. But this is further exacerbated by the fact that the toilets, the access to the toilets is in the exact same place as where the people are queuing for the food. And in peak seasons in previous years, you will see people queuing for the toilets. Now that will be combined with people queuing for the kiosk. There is not enough space to separate toilet queues, food queues, and have enough space for people walking on the promenade. The last point is really about the toilets. The point was made by somebody else, which is true. Yes, we've seen this public nuisance of toilets. The toilets are not always open. They are closed sometimes earlier. And even when they are closed, we have seen, residents have seen, as you may have read, that people are urinating in public areas, particularly on the beach, behind the beach huts as well. This has been spotted and indeed can be smelled. So again, causing a public nuisance. I think that the problem of that will only be exacerbated with the sale of alcohol. And yeah, I think that would sum up my points for the moment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Lake. We now have the opportunity for questions of the other persons by the members and the applicant and our licensing officer. But just before we start, could I just ask for a point of fact from you, Trudy, please, Mrs. Barlow? The previous speaker has spoken about the sale of alcohol. Could we just be have it confirmed, please, that the sale of alcohol does take place already, and this is the sale of alcohol from a specific area? Thank you, Mrs. Barlow.
The sale of alcohol at the moment is for the restaurant/cafe area of the premises, and it is for both on and off sales.
Thank you.
And
So
it's subject to those conditions regarding the off sales are subject to the conditions already mentioned regarding plastic bottles, cans, and with food. But they are already on there from the area.
Just to confirm then for our other persons that the sale of alcohol is possible at the moment. It's sold with food, it's sold in plastic containers, but it does happen. The sale of alcohol does occur at this moment in time.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. So now the opportunity, thank you very much for your submission, Mr. Lake. Grateful for your contributions. It's now an opportunity for the other persons to receive questions. So firstly, I'll open it up to our members. Councillor Anderson, do you have any questions at this moment in time for our other persons?
Thank you, Chair. No, I have no questions at this time.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Burton, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Chair. No questions for me at this present time.
No, thank you. So the members don't have any questions at this moment in time. I am trying to cover points which of course the members may raise, so I'm probably preempting questions as usual. So it's not that questions aren't being raised, they're being raised as appropriate. So Mr. Hayward, do you have any questions for Councillor Hilliard or Mrs. Rimmer or Mr. Lake?
First question would be from Councillor Hilliard.
So the first question is to Councillor Hilliard, thank you.
Yeah, stated that there have been known positive responses, or you haven't heard of any positive responses to our application. I was just wondering, have you tried to engage with us as your ward, in your ward and operation? Have you tried to engage with us with regards to the application?
Thank you. So Councillor Hilliard, if you'd like to answer that, please. Did you engage with Mr. Hayward with regard to the application? Thank you.
No, I have not personally engaged with Mr. Lee, the BCP officer who deals with the lease, has engaged, I believe, and is obviously supportive because of merits of the lease. We understand it is a very good business and locals do use it, But yeah, I haven't had the approach from Mr. Hayward, and similarly, I haven't approached him on this matter. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hilliard. Mr. Hayward, your next question.
For Mr. Lake, you asked a question of me as to whether we had actually operated takeaway alcohol facilities for the past 4 years in the fish and chip shop. I then wonder, how are you able to attribute our operation to the antisocial behaviour you've seen in the past 3 years? If you didn't know that we were selling alcohol, how are you able to label us as a cause of that?
Thank you, Mr. Lake. If you'd like to answer that, please. If you don't wish to answer it, you don't have to, of course. Thank you.
No, it's fine. But thank you. My comment related to the sale of alcohol from the kiosk hatch itself. But I'm fully aware that you are selling alcohol, of course, from the restaurant, and you can sell what's referred to as off food sales, or you can buy food in the restaurant and come outside with that. So it's those alcohol sales I was referring to.
I'm extremely grateful to you, Mr. Lake, for that clarification, because I was uncertain in your summation as to whether you realised that alcohol was already on sale. So thank you so much for that clarification. I'm grateful to you. Do you have any further questions, Mr. Hayward?
Just to point back, we haven't done alcohol for takeaway from the restaurant for the past 4 years. It's only been from the takeaway outlet, not from the restaurant, for the past 4 years.
Sorry, Mr. Hayward, that was a little swift. Could you say that again?
Sorry. The takeaway that we have provided, the alcohol we have provided for takeaway for the past 4 years has only been from the takeaway outlet. We haven't used the facility in the restaurant.
Okay, so you're, just for clarification, you're talking with regard to the TENS licenses?
Just the TENS notices, correct.
The TENS notices were served from the takeaway?
Yes.
Right, and not from the restaurant. Thank you for that clarification, thank you. Any further questions, Mr. Hayward, for any of the other persons?
No, thank you. No, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Trudy Barlow, do you have any questions for the other persons?
I have no questions. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for all your contributions. Now is your opportunity for everybody to sum up. So I will start with the party that spoke last, and the person that spoke last was Mr. Lake. So Mr. Lake, if you'd like to sum up, please. Thank you.
Yeah.
Your own summary, of course, not the whole case. Okay.
Not sum up the whole
That's
case.
my job.
That would be a difficult task.
Yeah,
to do everything. So thank you. I would sum up by stating that there have been surprisingly a huge number of objections from the local residents in the area who are passionate about their area and keeping it special. It is attracting so many people to the area because it is so special and because it is an area of natural beauty. And not all areas of natural beauty should have pop-up bars and fish and chip kiosks selling alcohol. To try and maintain and keep that special uniqueness that Avon Beach has, particularly for the families and small children, and for the elderly people, then that is a key consideration. And the number of applications against it, 44 objections, ranging in a huge number of points, I think must not be overlooked. The restaurant is currently selling alcohol and food in a very lovely way, and I've also been in the restaurant and enjoyed it greatly. But over and above that, there is food being sold by the fish, All Things Fish, now called the Hatch, is good for takeaway food for people who are not wearing shirts. Absolutely, fully agree. It's, do we really need to take the risk of now selling additional alcohol in an outside area directly onto the beach, which is very different environment to a pub where it's regulated and watched? That would be my summing up from my side.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lake. Mrs. Rimmer, if you'd like to summarise your submission, thank you.
I'd like to, my summary is very similar to that, but probably a little bit shorter. I think the facility that's there at the moment offers fantastic benefits to visitors and locals alike. I think the introducing the potential alcohol abuse, whether that happens or not, I think is unnecessary because of the nature of the area. It is a beauty spot and a destination for families worked very well for very many years. Why introduce something that could change the nature of that demographic?
Thank you very much, Mrs. Rimmer. And Councillor Hilliard.
Thank you, Chair. As I said earlier, it's very disappointing that the police weren't here to share their thoughts and their conditions, because looking at their conditions, and no doubt the committee have seen these, it doesn't fully, it seemed to be a blanket proposals, as if, I think it's very similar to the what I've seen before in other applications. So where they talk about CCTV cameras, they refer to the point of entry. Now, the point of entry and exit is the whole beach. And this is what I can't get my head around. And similarly, the patrol of police around Avon Beach, the beaches, are essentially unregulated PCS, community officer, police community officers. They're not actually police officers, so they got no powers to control or whatever. They're merely advisory. So this is where I think the committee are at a loss in many ways, because it's half-hearted comments from the police which aren't supported by their actual presence to monitor. So similarly, that there is no scheme, and as we've seen with Mr. Hayward and Mrs. Rimmer, the internet connection around the beaches is intermittent. So if there is an incident and you want to contact the police, good luck. So as I said, it just seems to be it's a very good business, doing very well from a restaurant. Takeaway sales of food works. No need to change that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hilliard. Thank you. So I will, after that last summation, I'll now conclude the hearing. The subcommittee will deliberate in private now with the legal advisor and clerk present, and notification of the subcommittee's decision will be provided within the period of 5 working days, beginning with the day or the last day on which the hearing was held in accordance with the regulations, it's COVID regulations, and that's today. And the notification of decision will include information about the right of appeal as appropriate. And I'll ask our legal advisor, please, Ms. Coulter, if she would explain the right of appeal. Thank you, Ms. Coulter.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm that the applicant and those parties that have made relevant representations, so those that have spoken today and those that haven't, will all have the right of appeal against the decision of the subcommittee. That right of appeal is to the Magistrates Court and has to be issued within 21 days of the date that the decision notice is received. And that information will be set out in the letter that is sent out to all parties. Thank you, Chair. I think you have Mr. Hayward.
Yes, I just noted that. I had concluded. Obviously, I hadn't seen the hands. Thank you so much, Ms. Coulter. Okay, I'll bring in Councillor Burton. Sorry, Councillor Burton, I didn't see you'd like to put forward your point. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I imagine I'm going to say the same thing as the other person, because I don't believe you allowed the applicant to sum up, Chair.
No, I did not indeed. So coming back to that, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hayward.
Thank you. Yeah, that's why I raised my hand as well. So to surmise our application, as has been stated by the objectors and myself, the operation has produced, we have sold alcohol for takeaway for the past 4 years. None of these doomsday scenarios that have been portrayed by the objectors have materialised. Our toilets, our beach facilities are well maintained. We have had no objections from local authorities with regards to Avon Beach. The concern with regard to, I mean, I can't believe we're being blamed for not having internet down on the beach, but for the police not being around, well, they obviously know the site. They know that it is a less troublesome area, even though we have been operating the alcohol sales for takeaway, which I don't believe would have an impact. And as a result, they don't feel the need to have presence there. I think that's a positive towards our application. The fact we've done this for the past 4 years, and the fact that the police don't seem the need to be there. We've been blamed on this meeting today for jet skiers being in the beach, for people leaving cars drunk. None of these are relevant to an application's That's individuals' responsibility. People are able to bring copious amount of drink to a public space like the beach. We provide, by us selling them alcohol, we provide us more stringent capabilities for them to consume. We do not serve drunk people. We do not serve people that look under the age of 25 unless they have the relevant identification, and they must consume food. That is much more controlled than someone picking up a load of alcohol from the nearest off license and drinking on the beach. As I said, we've conducted this on the peak days in the past, from 2019 to 2016, the peak days and the bank holiday weekends, and had no issues with the police, no issues with our landlord. And last year we conducted it throughout. And last year was crazy, the amount of people who attended the beach. And we had 0 issues regarding the sale of alcohol. The wording on the food has worked for the past 20 years. I don't understand why it can't work now. It's worked for the previous tenants and ourselves. We could sell alcohol from the restaurant, but we would have a constant in and out flow of people, and it just wouldn't be conducive to a nice restaurant atmosphere. Instead, we wish to provide another point of sale in order to ease congestion and ease queues. And finally, I agree, Avon Beach is a fantastic local family-friendly beach, one completely different in character to, say, Bournemouth and Boscombe, and that has a huge intrinsic value to us as a business. We wouldn't suggest we wouldn't propose what we're proposing today if we thought that would be impacted. We've used the past 4 or 5 years to conduct experiments, if you like, as to providing this service that's proposed to you today, and it hasn't impacted the nature of the area, and we believe it won't if approved. So I'd like to for the committee to consider the realistic and attributable aspects of this application, and not the random things that we get blamed for every single day.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Hayward. Again, my apologies. Your name directly in front of me, and yet I didn't call you. So thank you for that prompt to make sure that you had your opportunity to summarise. I will go through the conclusion again, just for point of record, and to thank everybody for their contributions. The subcommittee will deliberate in private with the legal advisor and clerk present. Notification of the subcommittee's decision will be provided within the period of 5 working days, beginning with the day or the last day on which the hearing was held, in accordance with the regulation and the COVID rules, and that's today. And the notification of decision will include information about the right of appeal as appropriate. And I will ask again if Ms. Coulter would give us that information. Thank you. And then I will end the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm that each party, and that includes members of the public that have made representations who may be here or not, have the right of appeal within 21 days of receiving the notice that will be sent out, and that will be set out in the notice. Thank you, Chair.
Indeed. Thank you very much for all your contributions from Mr. Lake and Mrs. Rimmer, and from Councillor Hilliard and from Mr. Hayward. And we will go off now and consider and deliberate with regard to your matter. Thank you very much indeed. The hearing.